Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a great show for you tonight. Nathan Leal is scheduled to be on. Of course, for new listeners, thanks for checking in with us. We appreciate hearing from where you're at. I want to say hello to Sue out of Idaho and Mark out of Mark K, just to be a little bit clearer, listening from San Diego, listening live, among others. Folks, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Our home base is Hagmann and Hagmann.com, and we are in studio tonight. We are looking forward to a great broadcast. My co-host, fellow investigator, my son, is Joe Hagmann, and as I like to say, together we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Tonight, of course, so much news, so much information. None of this makes sense, does it? None of this makes sense. If you go on Drudge today, for example, you've got, oh my goodness, what do we have? We've got Mexico failing to allow the Obama Ebola cruise ship to dock at Cozumel, turning that ship away. You've got Peggy Noonan, reporting that this is the administration, although I would not use that word. I would use the word regime, by the renegade-in-chief. This is the renegade-in-chief's Ebola, his Ebola evasions revealed disdain for Americans. Folks, we've been talking about this. The conservative media is starting to pick up on this. We've been talking about this for some time. Of course, the plan is to destroy the United States of America. Plain and simple. You want fundamental change? You got fundamental change. They're going to burn it all down, baby. Take it right down to the ground. And, of course, that's the goal, the plans of the Illuminati, the fictitious, oh, so fictitious Illuminati, right? It doesn't exist. We're just crazy. Tighten the tinfoil. Of course they do. Of course the power behind the powers that we can see are pulling the puppet strings. Otherwise, well, none of this would make sense. But it does get it through the prism of biblical prophecy, scripture, and of course the playbook of the Illuminati. I just want to say before we get going here, folks, don't forget next week in Caldwell, Idaho, Augusto Perez is going to be appearing October 24th, 25th, and 26th, Caldwell, Idaho, the Valley Church. Fire in the Valley, reaping the harvest. We will not be there, but Augusto will, and if we could, we would, but we can't. I just wish anyone near that area or who wants to meet Augusto, my goodness, that would be a tremendous opportunity. It's going to be a life-changing opportunity, I think, for some. And then, of course, next month, November 14th and 15th, you can catch us in Dublin, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio area. An easy drive for many people if you choose to go. We're going to be at the Prophecy Forum, the conference there. Information via our website, hagmannandhagmann.com. So now that I've done the housekeeping for this portion of the broadcast, Joe, welcome to the studio. You were here bright and early doing all sorts of radio interviews, and interesting to just sit there and watch you do the radio interviews, and while I did my work as well. So it's good to have you. Good to see you.
Good to be here. And I did do the 2-hour interview earlier, and it's funny, I was talking on this interview, and I have my dad in the background, giving me thumbs up and cheering me on, saying words that I should incorporate into what I was saying, or giving me the thumbs down and booing from across the room. So it was fun.
Hey, I'm a dad first, right? I'm still a dad. Folks, tonight, Nathan Leal will join us, and we'll be talking about the Illuminati, the plans. Just let me remind you of something. The lyrics, the dark horse. Oh no, Juicy J and Katy Perry. Oh,
Juicy
no.
J? What's that?
Yeah, the featured artist, Juicy J, with Katy Perry doing the Dark Horse song, if that's what you want to call this. I would call it a spell incantation. Of course, we saw this at the Grammys, did we not? Katy Perry and Juicy J, this duet, not like Bogey and McCall or whatever, but no, this is something different. Here are the lyrics, folks, and isn't this prophetic? Oh no. Juicy J comes in. Yeah, y'all know what it is. Katy Perry, Juicy J, let's rage. Katy Perry. I knew you were. You were going to come to me, and here you are. But you better choose carefully, because I'm capable of anything and everything. Make me your Aphrodite, or Aphrodite, if you prefer. Make me your one and only, but don't make me your enemy, your enemy, your enemy. So you want to play with magic? Boy, you should know what you're falling for. Do you dare to do this? Because I'm coming at you like a dark horse. Are you ready for a perfect storm? Perfect storm? Because once you're mine, there's no going back. Mark my words, this love will make you levitate. Like a bird without a cage, but down to earth. If you choose to walk away, don't walk away. It's in the palm of your hand now, baby. It's a yes or a no. No, maybe. So just be sure, before you give it all to me, give it all to me. So you want to play with magic. Boy, you should know what you're falling for. Baby, do you dare do this? Because I'm coming at you like a dark horse. Are you ready for a perfect storm? Perfect storm. Because once you're mine, love tripping, there's no going back. And then Juicy J comes in. She's a beast. I call her Karma. Come back? She eats your heart out like Jeffrey Dahmer. Be careful. Try not to lead her on. Shorty's heart is on steroids because her love is so strong. You may fall in love when you meet her. If you get the chance, you better keep her. She's sweet as pie, but if you break her heart, she'll turn cold as a freezer. That fairy tale ending with a knight in shining armor, she could be my sleeping beauty. I'm going to put her in a coma. Ooh. Damn, I think I love her. Shorty's so bad. I'm sprung and I don't care. She ride me like a roller coaster, turned the bedroom into a fair affair. Her love is like a drug. I was trying, hit it and quit it. But little mama's so dope, I messed around and got addicted. Then Katy Perry comes in with the finale.
This is better than the music.
You like this?
Yeah. I got some requests.
Yes. Well, so you want to play with magic. Boy, you should know what you're falling for. You should know. Baby, do you dare to do this? Because I'm coming at you like a dark horse, Are you ready for a perfect storm, a perfect storm? Because once you're mine, there's no going back. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you right now, as we are knee-deep in headlines about Ebola. Soldiers get just 4 hours of virus training. Non-American victims coming to the USA for treatment. Vomit scare at the Pentagon. CDC tells New York City, you better get ready, because I'm coming for you. I'm coming at you like a dark horse. We've got a hospital worker in quarantine on a cruise ship. Mexico turns away that cruise ship like a red-headed stepchild. Yes, all of these headlines, outbreak causing people to change travel plans. Staff in Texas asked to avoid public spaces. Prepping goes mainstream. And, of course, the coup de grace. The new Obama czar has no medical or health background. Why would he? Folks, want to alert you to stevequayle.com. That's stevequayle.com. Go to stevequayle.com. On the right, upper right-hand side, there's a link to his Ebola page. On that page, 6 hours, a minimum, with Joe, Doug, that's me, Steve, and a medical doctor, referenced only as Dr. S because he's still in practice, and there's some other issues. Then, of course, people might know who he is, but bottom line is talking about the seriousness of this, and I talked once again to Steve early this morning. I mean early. This guy doesn't sleep. And once again, where's the beef? Where's the blood? Are we getting hoodwinked? What kind of virus is this? Is it Ebola? Or is this a mutation? And as Jack, God bless you, Jack, as Jack said, Steve Quayle verified it, death is in the needle. Think about that. Ebola came into this country via aircraft, like 9/11. Template right from 9/11. Look what 9/11 happened. Look what 9/11 brought us. Some, most informed, called 9/11 a false flag. You've got to understand the definition in this case of false flag. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It means that it didn't happen the way it was said to us, right? You think this is any different? I think not. In terms of it's not making any sense. This is making as much sense, ladies and gentlemen, as you watching the BBC and the BBC reporting Building 7 having collapsed, yet it remains in the background. Does that make sense to you? Does Building 7 make sense to you? I asked, does Ebola make sense to you? Open borders make sense to you?
Common core man.
Yeah, that's right. How did Thomas Duncan get here to this country? Who paid for his ticket? What associations does he have? Patient zero, right? And what about the CDC saying, oh, go ahead, go to Cleveland? We hear first she's asymptomatic. Now we're hearing that, oh, wait, I guess that wasn't quite right. Symptomatic, 3, perhaps 4 days prior to getting the okay. Who's calling the shots and why? What's the ultimate target? Well, just like this perfect storm, it's to take America down. And there's a number of ways this will happen, but this is going to be, I believe this in part is going to be responsible for taking America down in terms of the economy. This is a shot at our economy. This is the self-immolating phoenix, only to be reborn into a new world order. And who better to do that than Bathhouse Barry, Barack Hussein Obama, Michelle Obama, and the Clintons, and we'll throw in the Bushes for good measure, right? Just to be accused of being partisan. And, of course, don't forget all of the things that Nathan and others on the program, Paul McGuire, Nathan Leal, and others talked about, Doc Marquis, Steve and other people talked about on this program, all the signs, all the Illuminati generated warnings. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Whether it be the 2012 ceremonies regarding the Olympics, or the 2012 Olympic ceremonies, with all of that weird, odd, pandemic play stuff, or the 2014 Super Bowl ceremony, or the Super Bowl commercials, where we know the power elite communicate not only amongst themselves, but fulfill their requirement to tell us what's going on, or what will be. Are we seeing that now? I think we're seeing the beginning stages of that now. And that, folks, opens tonight's program.
Nathan will be joining us at any moment, and we do have a few pieces of news that we should hit while we are waiting for Nathan to come on. And I'm just pulling up my notes here. This is from an Ebola story, excuse me, that I found very interesting.
Wait a second. Give me my N95 mask. There was a cough here in the office. We have to declare a state of emergency. There was a cough in the office.
Call our local clergy response team to get a hold of the administration. I would love to be quarantined or sent to my house to be a prisoner of my house. That would be a vacation. So, yeah, you get on the horn, call. I would call see something, say something line. Maybe three-way it into the DOJ and CDC. I don't know. Who do you call? Do you call your local authorities when you want to report someone for quarantine, or do you call, state police? Is it a FBI issue? We need to figure out, since obviously this huge pandemic sweeping across the nation will not stop at any cost, we might as well learn the protocols of enforcing their authority and turn over all our sovereignty and power and rights to the United Nations and their Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What are you doing? Learning how to look at a cell phone there? No, seriously. This headline: a passenger died on a Nigeria to JFK flight after vomiting fit on Thursday. Top lawmaker officials gave the corpse only a cursory exam before declaring the victim did not have Ebola. Representative Peter King, and yeah, this passenger went into a vomiting fit on a plane from Nigeria to New York City and died during that flight. Between 70 and 100 passengers arrived at JFK from the Ebola-stricken countries of Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, and they had access to public restrooms and mingled with other travelers before their first screening. Given the high volume of travelers at JFK, it's essential that extraordinary measures are taken to intercept possible Ebola-infected passengers while keeping the public and first responders safe. That's what Representative King said in a letter to Homeland Security and to Customs Commissioner Gil Kerliquist. These individuals transits the airport with the rest of the traveling population, including using the restrooms. It's only after they arrive at Customs and Border Protection primary screening locations that they are separated and sent to a secondary inspection for their medical screening, and a complete questionnaire is given to them. His letter demands Homeland Security immediately beef up protocols for potentially infected passengers, both in flight and at the terminal itself prior to their reaching their screening location. The letter demands better training and safety equipment for Port Authority police and Customs and Border Protection officials who can or may come in contact with high-risk passengers. The unnamed passenger, age 63, boarded this flight Wednesday night out of Lagos, Nigeria, which had 19 Ebola cases this year, though no new cases in the past month. And yes, it's longer than that. I did some research. In Nigeria and Sierra Leone, this was the biggest area of, Lagos, is third largest city in the world, 21 million plus people live here. They had 19 Ebola cases, and for 2 months they have had no new cases, which I found very interesting. There is something...
No new cases for 2 months.
In Nigeria. Now, somebody, as we went through some statistics yesterday and the day before, is really doing a number to cause fear, or whatever they're trying to accomplish by this. Maybe just confusion. That's what it seems to me, that it is a complete train wreck. You have the media, controlled media, giving every angle sensationally.
Controlled media.
Yeah, promoting the fear from many different viewpoints. Then you have others in the media, making jokes about Ebola and how it spreads, and you have others who are kind of waiting to see, I think, what becomes of it before they make an assessment. I hear the arguments on different talk shows: is Ebola a bigger threat to the U.S. than ISIS? Stupid things. Climate change is more of an enemy than Ebola. So is this a social conditioning exercise on a massive scale, monitoring responses on social media and however they monitor these, whether private conversations or public posts, seeing what people say, how they react, what other conspiracy theories come from these stories that are put out. We have had listeners send us information and videos that the crisis actors are involved in some of these West African countries, and that Ebola is not the actual threat. The vaccine is the threat, or whatever that treatment that they get.
Ultimately, that will be. Yeah. But ultimately, I believe that will be.
If I remember correctly, the vaccine isn't available. There is no Ebola vaccine.
There will be.
But who?
There will.
But they are. I remember this in Liberia. I don't know when or how long ago it was. I thought this yesterday. One of the articles said the Liberian citizens believed Ebola was not real, that it was a hoax, and that the quote-unquote cure was what was really infecting people. And I'm going to do some research here real fast, as soon as Nathan comes on, to find out what are the standard protocols for treating Ebola, if there is a vaccine, if it's available, and what feds request production plans for Ebola drug. This is a article today from Yahoo News or AP. U.S. requests production plans for Ebola drug ZMapp. They've submitted advanced biology laboratories to submit plans for producing the experimental Ebola drug, which ran out after it was given to a handful of medical workers who contacted the disease in West Africa. The task order issued on Thursday by the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority asked that the detailed plans, including budgets and timetables, be submitted by the 10th of November. It goes on to say that this will, and tobacco is a part of this. For some reason, tobacco is one of the main ingredients that heals Ebola, or is used to combat it. Using mammalian cells, a more traditional technique than the tobacco plants used to produce these ZMapp vaccines. Anyway, so the U.S. government is working with partners around the world to develop this vaccine, multiple vaccines, and other therapeutic measures to prevent and treat Ebola. 3 advanced labs in the U.S. are, with the partnership of the U.S. government, are tirelessly working here to get these ZMapp vaccines, scaling up production to disperse them into the public.
Well, meanwhile, okay, and if you go to stevecoyle.com, on his Ebola section, top headline, I'm a hazmat-trained hospital worker. Here's what no one is telling you about Ebola. And very simply, he said, or the writer of this, Abby Norman, who is a writer and healthcare scientist, says, Ebola is brilliant. It's a superior virus that has evolved and fine-tuned its mechanisms of transmission to be near perfect. That's why we're all so terrified. There's that word, terrified. You see, we cannot destroy it. All we can do is try to divert it, outrun it. There is no virus at this, or no vaccine at this point for it. Well, let's see here. They can't destroy it by virus. But believe me, according to what we talked about earlier, they're going to come at us with a needle. And I do believe that this is part and parcel to it. Just look, folks, look at what, Joe, I understand what you said, but look at the damage that's being done already.
Well, the damage being done emotionally to people who are uneasy and allow themselves to be shaken up by Ebola. One person has died who came from Africa infected. 2 other workers have been infected. The American workers who went to West Africa, who came back here to get treatment in Atlanta, were all recovered. 3 of them recovered. So, I don't know, the chances of these 2 workers, I would say, are fairly, at least 75-25 for them to survive, I would say. Why? I don't know. What's involved in that?
Because I don't believe what we're dealing. And I referenced the research of Steve and others. We talked, and I don't believe what we're dealing with is the Ebola Zaire virus or the other type of virus. I believe this is a mutation. I think Steve does as well, and Greg Evenson does as well. This is some sort of mutation, perhaps a laboratory created.
Yeah.
I'll just say a bioweapon type of thing. And what is this designed to do? It's designed to instill fear, panic, as well as death. But death will come, not necessarily at the mortality rate of this mutated virus, but death will come in other means, by civil unrest, by civil disharmony, and busting up the place, the United States, as well as through the vaccine. So this is what I think it is. And really the icing on the cake, or the capstone on the pyramid, is to destroy the U.S. economy, and also to have de facto martial law. People laugh at that and say, "Oh, that come on, again, your tinfoil hat's too tight." But think about it. You're going to be called, not you, the audience, but people around you will be calling for mandatory quarantines, and they'll be calling for, watch, all of a sudden they're going to have a vaccine that'll be.
I'm volunteering for quarantine.
Yeah, well, that's all well and good, unless you've not prepared for a quarantine. But the fact of the matter is, the objective here is to destroy the United States of America as we know it. Plain and simple. Why do you think the borders are useless? Why do you think that no one is talking about or no one is closing down the borders? Are you serious? It would affect trade? Come on. Is that what really is the cause of this? Well, and isn't it interesting, the even dispersal of the victims of this mutation of the Ebola virus across the United States? Having said that, our very special guest tonight is Nathan Leal from Watchman's Cry, and in fact, if you go to Hagmann&Hagmann.com, Hagmann&Hagmann.com, right there on the top story is the link to Nathan's website, and that is Watchman's. Let me just verify that. My goodness, that is Watchman'sCry.com. It's just Watchman'sCry.com. I would urge everyone to go there and to read what Nathan has uncovered via his research. Boy, I'll tell you, he's a great guy.
Yeah, and Nathan, it's great to have you on. I understand you want to talk about Ebola this evening, so if you want to start there, go ahead, or wherever else you'd like to start.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. There's a lot of things that I need to talk about, and I just want to get started right out of the gate. Doug and Joe, I am very, very concerned over the things that are happening, and I also agree, and I understand the questions that you were bringing up earlier, because I believe that most of the awake public is asking those same questions. They are noticing anomalies, confusion, inconsistencies, and just stories that do not make sense. We are seeing duplicity. We are seeing incompetence with professionals who should know better. So things do not make sense right now, and I think a lot of the general public is starting to notice that, and the ones that are awake are especially starting to notice that. So the question is, when we look at all of these weird anomalies, is what do we do? How do we process it? What's the conclusion? So I want to talk about that tonight, and I really need to stress that I don't think that we should be just looking at it from a casual point of view. Gentlemen, I'm very, very concerned that we've entered a new chapter. The next stage of the plan is here. As you told me off the air, Doug, we're in the fourth quarter. The plan, we're beyond the halftime now, and things are starting to unravel. They're going to start happening, and I'm going to talk about all that tonight. I'm also going to talk about a prophetic dream that I had last Friday on October the 11th, and I published it over the weekend. Many of your listeners have probably already read it, but I'm going to make mention of it and cite it because that dream that I had summarizes what's about to happen, and I'm going to break it down. Listeners, if you have not read my prophetic dream, you can go to my website, watchmanscry.com. It's available on the front page, and you can read it and follow along. But Doug and Joe, I think that we're in trouble. I believe that we're at the place where we need to change our strategy. And Joe, a few weeks ago when I was on, I was stating that if people really knew how serious our situation was, they would be changing their priorities, they would be clearing their schedule, and I maintain that because right now we are in the last minutes. We're in the last days or weeks, and when we're finished with this show, I'm going to leave everyone and the listeners with a challenge that whatever it takes, ladies and gentlemen, you need to be planning for either your exit plan or your sheltering in place plan, your survival plan, your longevity plan, your endurance plan. It has to start now. You need to start acquiring the things you've been putting off that you've just talked about. Don't let the things that we talk about in this program just be dialogue and talking points after the show's over. Meetings have to take place with family members. People, husbands and wives, need to talk to one another. You have to rearrange the schedule, ladies and gentlemen. Get food, get dried food, whatever it takes. Doug and Joe, we are at a place that's going to get weird. That's the best way I can sum it up. It's going to get weird, and not only weird, it's going to become chaotic, and mayhem is at the door. So, you know, it's amazing. We've been doing this thing for how long? How many years have I been up on the wall, and how long have you been doing this, Doug and Joe, and the many guests that you have had that have brought another portion of what's going on and the things to come? And if we take all of those parts and lay them on the table as a puzzle and start assembling them together, we're starting to see the picture. And the picture's always been clear, and we've always known what the picture is in the end game. But the thing that's hard to swallow and hard to process as regular people is, as Americans or residents of the West or first world living, we are not accustomed to seeing mass chaos to the point where there's dead bodies in the street. We're not used to that. We can't fathom it. The rest of the world can. In South America, they know what dead bodies on the side of the road look like. In the Middle East and Asia and in the East, they know. But here in America, we can't fathom it. So instead of preparing for it and believing that, yeah, the worst case is at the door and it can happen, it's hard for our brains to comprehend that. So then there's a tendency to try to misdirect it and say, well, no, it's just all a ruse, it's theater, there's no way it can happen. like they're saying, because that's just too crazy. I mean, how could that many people die here in America? So it's hard to imagine that, but if we look through the lens that we're supposed to be looking through, multi-dimensional lens, including the spiritual realm, which includes the end times, which includes Bible prophecy and God, and also what time it is, which includes that America's under judgment and so is the world. If we look through that lens, then we have to include that there are more players involved and that things are beyond our reach to comprehend. So when we do that, then it opens up a whole new challenge, but then it provides answers. And so tonight I'm going to present a lot of information from that point of view. And I just hope and pray, Doug and Joe, that we are able to go and to continue what we're supposed to do. The wise man sees the evil coming in. He prepares himself. I want to just start out by just addressing what you have already started, Doug, about the Illuminati and the Olympics and the Super Bowl. And, you know, for the last few years I've also been dissecting that and talking about the telegraphing of the warning. They let us know what they're going to do. And during the Olympics, they showed the beds on the field. They showed the sick kids on the field. They showed the nurses and doctors who became zombies. If you can remember those images, they were.
But Nathan, we were crazy for bringing that up. Oh my goodness, we were called nutcases for even bringing that up when this what we saw there was so disconnected from the Olympics. It was a clear-cut message to us. So go ahead, Nathan. I didn't mean to interrupt.
You're exactly right, Doug. We were mocked and we were scoffed as well as our colleagues. I guess that's just the way it is. The mocking and the scoffing is part of the equation. But the Olympics telegraphed that health was going to be involved. Now, why in the world would Summer Olympics even show the images that they did? It made no sense. But they did it. And they let us know what was going to happen. They let us know that public health, public welfare, the government, the nanny state, because Mary Poppins came down out of the sky and saved the day when the nurses and the doctors were sick, they arrived. But before that, we saw several categories of things taking place in the Olympic demonstration, in the theatrical production. We saw sick kids. We saw children under the control of nurses and doctors. We saw the release of demonic creatures that were running around stealing kids. We saw the horse-drawn carriage, and I believe that was from the movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I had a listener tell me that's what it was from, who was also stealing children. So all of those things are hints of what's going to happen. As this story unfolds and as these events unfold, however we want to process them, whether it's a false flag or it's happening on its own, or its nature, or its evolution of mutated viruses, whatever, the end game, the end result is going to be that the nanny state is going to control everything. They're going to come to the rescue, and also doctors and nurses are going to be involved. Children are going to be involved. So the vaccine is a part of their plan. They let us know that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking about this for several years, and I have been crying from the wall for several years. God revealed this to me in 2009. I released my Liberty Will Be Decapitated dream on, now get this, Doug, a listener informed me of this recently in the email. I didn't even realize it. They emailed me and they said, Nathan, did you know when you released your Liberty dream was on February the 2nd, 2009, which was the same date of the Super Bowl, 2013? February 2nd, exactly 5 years before. And in that dream, I saw the Statue of Liberty beheaded, and it happened twice. And in the second dream, the hand of God came down out of the sky. He had a sword in his hand, and he chopped off the head himself, meaning this is a divine event. After I sought God days later, for 3 days, I sought him, and I asked him, what does this mean? And God told me that major events are coming, and there's going to be a big one that's going to come, and it's going to separate parents from their kids. I've shared that on your program, and I continue to share that. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end game. That's part of what the New World Order wants. They want to kidnap your children So what is the remedy? And God gave me the remedy. And we can find it in the book of Lamentations. We're supposed to be on our knees, lifting up our kids, our family, our loved ones, crying out through tears in the night, asking God to protect them. So the strategy for this thing, whether it's engineered or if it's nature on a warpath to humans, doesn't matter. The strategy is the same, and that's to cry out to God. Now, by the way, side note, God is letting this happen. And that's the thing that we cannot allow to sidetrack us. Even though we are seeing that it may be engineered and it's mutating, and I've seen those stories myself, Doug. I have spent hours and hours over the last few days and weeks just trying to make sense of this, and then I go and pray, and the Holy Spirit says, Nathan, get back to the basics. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me say this. Get back to the basics. There's a spiritual thing going on. If we look at the conspiracy, the biggest conspiracy in the history of mankind and creation, it occurred, and we can see the beginnings of the discussion of this conspiracy in the Bible. And it's found in the book of Matthew, chapter 12, verse 14. And it says this. Make note of this, ladies and gentlemen, because even if that man with a clipboard on the tarmac didn't have his hazmat suit on and it makes us confused, Satan wants that. The New World Order wants that. Tavistock wants us to be confused. But we have to see behind the scenes. Matthew 12:14 says, then the Pharisees went out and plotted against him, Jesus, on how they might kill him. So behind the scenes of the crucifixion, there was a plot going on. Behind the scenes of the worst crime in the history of the universe, where they killed our Messiah, which is what God wanted the whole time, because he fulfilled the prophecies of being the Lamb of God, and thank God he did. He bore the cup, he drank from the cup, and he died, and then he rose again, and that's our hope. But that did not happen in a vacuum. It wasn't an accident. It required conspiracy to happen. It required evil men to meet in a closed room session, smoking their cigars, discussing how they were going to play it out. And today we're seeing the same thing. They sit behind the closed doors and they smoke their cigars and they plan how they're going to do this. So even though it's a conspiracy and even though there's man's evil, ugly hand involved, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot forget that it's still a divine plan that's happening. And if that's the case, that means God is going to allow some things to take place. And I have been crying out with this message for years, Doug and Joe. God gave me the prophecy in 2008, April the 18th. It was published. Judgment has begun. And that's the other thing that cannot be forgotten. Judgment is here in the United States and in the world, and judgment has certain elements that are a part of judgment. There's 4 elements. I've shared that many times on your program as well as on my own programs. Judgment includes famine, the release of wild beasts, which are satanic demon hordes, pestilence, and then war. So pestilence will make an appearance in America because it's God's judgment. Now, if we go back and look at the calendar of when the famine judgment officially began, in my opinion, I believe that it began on September the 28th, 2008, when we saw the stock market drop 777. That happened on Rosh Hashanah, or the eve of Rosh Hashanah. That was a very, very pivotal, profound event, and now we just passed the marker for year 6 of that thing. Now, Joe, the last time I was on your program, I talked about Leviticus 26 and how the 4 judgments occur, how God carries out the 4 judgments. And if we look at Leviticus 26, I didn't really spend a lot of time on it. I'm going to be doing another program where I really, really break this thing down. But if we look at Leviticus 26, it tells us what transpires during the judgments. The first round is the warning round, the salvo over the bow of the ship to get everybody's attention, to make us realize that we're not alone and that we're not an island and that God is keeping score. But that is found in Leviticus 26, verse 16. It says, I will do this to you. I will appoint terror over you and consumption.
I love it.
Now that
by
disease...
the way, you did.
Go ahead.
Nathan, I'm sorry. I was not here for that broadcast, but I did listen to that. You were spot on with Leviticus and about the shot across the bow. I do want to just say this. and interject this, folks, also, and Nathan, however you want to fit this in, do not forget, ladies and gentlemen, Nathan also talked about the Super Bowl 2014. I know this is out of order, but I just want to plant the seed for later on. Remember the words prepare, prepare, prepare. Children were saying that. Children were in the audience. And what do we see in addition to Ebola? Let's not forget the Entero D68 virus that originated, we know, in Central America and has been distributed all across the United States, all 48 states, if not all 50, or 57 if you're Obama, depending on what your outlook might be, your religious proclivities might be. But having said that, Entero D68 was imported into this country as well. And lastly, and I'll turn it back over to you, to bring about the population of large cities, according to the trial run carried out by Pol Pot regime in Cambodia. It's interesting that this is one of the plans to bring about the depopulation of large cities here in America, as indicated by the targets or the plans of the Illuminati Committee of 300. You can read about in just about any publication, and also referenced by Dr. John Coleman and talked about by Nathan Leal from Watchman's Cry. Nathan, thank you for allowing me to interject that. You go right ahead, sir.
And thank you for bringing that up, because I want to make a comment on that in a moment. I wrote that down so I don't forget. But what I was saying is the first wake-up call from God is terror, and 9/11 was that. It was the wake-up call. That's Leviticus 26:16. I will appoint terror and wasting disease or consumption. If you look up that word consumption, it means a disease of the lungs. And 9/11 has killed how many hundreds or even thousands of people since then? It's not on the news. It's not reported. But a lot of people have died. And a fever which shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow. A lot of people have died, and the sorrow has not stopped. But America didn't change. Now, they cried for 2 weeks after 9/11, but then everyone went back to their regular business. So God gave us some grace, and then on September 28, 2008, the next phase started, and that's verse 18. If you don't obey me, then I'll punish you 7 more times, and I'll break the pride of your power and make the heavens like iron, your earth like bronze. Your strength shall be in vain, your land shall not produce its fruit. That's famine right there. We have seen the economic hardship of America for the past 6 years, without a doubt, without question, and we're also seeing the drought in certain portions of the country. And then God says, I'm going to let you figure it out and repent, but if you don't, then it's going to get 7 times worse. That's verse 21. I will bring on you 7 times more plagues according to your sins. Since 2008, the sins have not decreased, Joe and Doug. They have increased in America. The embarrassment, the scorecard of our virtue is an embarrassment to the world, because America now takes pride in being a prodigal. America takes pride in stepping on God and laughing at his statutes. The gay marriage agenda has spread throughout the country, and now it's just a part of regular living. It's a part of regular life. But it's not just that. It's all the areas of our embarrassing the virtue scorecard that it's on record now. So because America hasn't repented, the next phase is starting. Verse 21, ladies and gentlemen, the plague, 7 times worse. And the plagues are going to be according to our sins. So there's a lot of sins that we have. The aborted babies, just go down the list. I don't want to digress with that. We know that we're in a mess, but that's where we are. So God is going to let this happen, 7 times more plagues. And also, this is going to be a two-part episode of the next phase. I will also send wild beasts among you, which shall rob you of your children, destroy your livestock, make you few in number. That is also going to be the next part of this coming saga, which includes wild beasts, demonic hordes. That's ISIS, and it's the release of demonic spirits that are going to wreak havoc. Now, how interesting is it that the Olympics showed us that? They came out from under the ground, they came out from under the tree, and they walked all over the field, and they just let us know that the incantation was in motion, the summoning was successful, and these creatures that they pulled out of the earth were sent home with all the athletes. So every nation of the world was sent home with a spell, a curse, if you will, And I know this sounds superstitious, but ladies and gentlemen, again, we need to look beyond the regular veil and limitations of the natural and of science and of first world technology that blinds us to the truth. This thing is in motion, so the plague judgment has begun, and we are watching the very beginning of it. So for us to, and here's the hard part, Joe and Doug, if we stay in the confusion of, but it looks like it was made in the lab, that part doesn't matter, because the end result is still going to be what God allows. Every time God judged Israel, he used human agency. He brought the sword from the Philistines, the Canaanites, and all the parasites that lived next to Israel, the Babylonians, Egyptians, etc. He used other humans. And before the judgment arrived where those people crossed the borders of Israel and wreaked havoc and started whacking people and shedding blood, there was a plan that was already in motion with the enemy. Weeks before, months before, they were sharpening their swords. They were getting their muskets ready. They were making the gunpowder, if you will. When God sends a judgment, he starts behind the scenes, so the enemy begins to sew their uniforms together and prepare so that when they invade, they're going to be successful. So behind the scenes here for us right now, yeah, maybe there is in Fort Detrick, Maryland, in some laboratory, a mad scientist cackling while he makes his latest concoction of a Ebola mutation that's going to wreak havoc on America. But that doesn't mean that God's not allowing it, and that doesn't mean that God is not making it happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is God's judgment. We are seeing it happen. Well, Nathan, those people were good people that died. Duncan was a good man. Some of those people were even missionaries. That is part of to try to figure that part out is in God's department. And I can't answer all of those questions because we can even read in the book of Ezekiel many times when Ezekiel was trying to warn Israel, and Jeremiah said the same thing, the righteous will also fall with the unrighteous. That's in God's department. So being that a person is a Christian does not eliminate them from dying in the judgment. It doesn't mean that they won't die. The book of Revelation shows us a glimpse of millions of people crying out who were beheaded by the beast, saying, God, how long till you make this right? So good people do die in judgment. So does that mean that we're without hope? No. It just means that we have a lot of homework to do, and even though I know that the righteous do perish during the judgment, I'm going to up my efforts, and I'm going to increase my efforts and increase my prayer time and increase my Bible seeking, and I'm going to increase the efforts to God to ask him to protect my family for Psalms 91, because that's our homework, ladies and gentlemen. Joe and Doug, we can't surpass that. We can't disclose. We can't deny it or set it aside. Now, sadly, let me just say this, Doug and Joe, and I say this with disappointment. Sadly, many of the people that listen to this program, when this thing really gets going, are going to die. And many of the people that are awake and they love to listen to Alex Jones and Steve Quayle and you and me, they're not spiritually ready, and they haven't even lifted a finger to be spiritually ready, even though they hear me talk about these things on my programs. And the hunger for spiritual readiness is not even close to what it should be among our listening audience. That means most of you that are listening, ladies and gentlemen, there's a huge portion of you that aren't ready, and most of you aren't even hungry to get ready. And I find that disappointing and sad. Now, how can I say that? That's a blunt statement. How can I say that? Here's how. Here's how I know this, Doug. Because when I send out a program, a News from the Wall program, my News from the Wall programs are about the quote-unquote things that are coming, doom, if you will, the scary stuff. When I send out a News from the Wall program, I have the logs, and I see how many people click on the program to listen to it. And it's the majority do. They want to listen to the scary stuff. But when I send out a sermon that talks about repentance, and it talks about us having to look in the mirror and face the true reality of our condition, that we are undone and that we are a mess and that we are a disappointment to God and a disappointment to our families as fathers and mothers, as parents, that we are failing. When I send out a message that tells people how to fix that, the numbers of people that click on the sermons are maybe a third, Joe and Doug. People would rather hear doom than how to fix their soul. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking to every one of you. Shame on you. God is going to hold us accountable. And for those of you that are so stubborn that you would rather just get scared and eat your popcorn and then talk about the scary stuff and wonder how it's going to play out, instead of getting on your knees after the show and crying out to God and telling him you're sorry for the sins that are trailing behind you, that's an embarrassment, ladies and gentlemen. And I am a messenger of God. I am a servant of God, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. The church of God is not ready for what's coming, and that's why God's going to let it happen. That's why God is going to allow tears to be exposed in everyone's eyes. That's why God is going to let the images be before us, because we are not ready, and we have not turned. And when Jeremiah tried to speak to his nation through tears, he begged them and he pleaded, and he cried out, and he said, people. He cried out to the priests, to the leaders, and he said, priests, please stop it. Stop the things you're doing and turn around and repent. And they didn't do it, and they mocked and scoffed, and they laughed. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bring this message today not from the point of conspiracy and not to entertain you and not to scare you and to leave you with the feeling of just doom with nothing else. These things are happening because God, the God of heaven, the God who created you from your mother's womb, the God who lets you breathe every day and wake up every morning and go to work, the God who allows you to have your spirit to continue another day, to give you another chance to repent. I bring this message so that you can do that before our time is out. Because the bottom line of our situation, ladies and gentlemen, is that we someday, if God doesn't come back, every one of us are going to die. You're going to die someday, ladies and gentlemen. And when that happens, then what? It's going to be too late for a regret. It's going to be too late to fix the mess. It's going to be too late to backpedal and say, well, I guess I could have or I should have or why can't I? It's going to be too late to get past our pride and fix the mess. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're in a mess right now. This country is in a mess, and I stand before you and I cry out right now with this voice saying that time is running out. And I don't just mean to buy dried food. Time is running out to have a solemn assembly. Time is running out, Dad and Mom, for you to finally start standing in the gap for your teenagers that are away from God. I get emails from people that say my teenager won't come to God. My husband won't come to God. My wife won't come to God. What's the remedy for that? It's called standing in the gap. It's called turning off the TV. It's called spending time on your knees, crying out and holding them up, pleading, standing in the gap between the plague and them, just like Aaron did when the plague came to the children of Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out, and my cry today is that the people of God and that the people that are listening would wake up and realize how dire our situation is. Now, Doug, I see the clock. In the second hour and the third hour, I'm going to share my prophetic dream, and I'm going to share what's really happening. And ladies and gentlemen, I know that I am speaking with passion, but I have to.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Because when we hit our knees tonight, instead of saying, hey, God, can you do this for me? Let's have some real prayer, and instead of asking, let's have some praise and repentance, as Nathan Leal has discussed or has so passionately cried for. My goodness, that was a tremendous first hour. Folks, our very special guest tonight, Nathan Leal, watchmanscry.com. Bookmark that site.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with our guest tonight, Mr. Nathan Leal. His website is watchmanscry.com. Bookmark that site. There's constant articles, videos, audio sermons, and messages, as well as an interactive forum to join. It's a great place to listen to the archive of Nathan's sermons.
Okay, let me ask you this. Are you or any others experiencing audio problems with our broadcast? I'm getting reports. Karen, thank you for this.
Been all week.
All right.
For me, at least. Nathan, how does it sound on your end?
You sound good here on the phone.
Okay.
Any distortion or getting cut out at all?
How about from the chat room? Any feedback from there? Okay. Looking at that,
No, fine.
Okay,
Sounds
all
good.
right. I just got a couple of emails from people who are having some difficulties, but as
Maybe
long
it's all
as
their ears. Just kidding.
No, but well, okay, fine. Let's move along. Boy, I'll tell you, Nathan, you're on fire. You're exactly right. Amen. I got a lot of people saying you are right on the money, Nathan. God bless you for bringing this up. We need to hit our knees. We need to repent. We need to stand in the gap. And it's about time somebody comes out there and says exactly what you said with the passion that you said it with, and keep on going, brother.
Well, thank you, Doug. You made mention in the previous hour of the Entero 68 virus, and here in northern Idaho where I live, there's been some sickness going around where half the town has been battling it, and it also affected me here in my house. And after it was around it's lasted a month, by the way, with my whole family. I have 3 kids and my wife, but it's been around back and forth. It leaves and comes back. It's lasted a month, and let me tell you what the symptoms are, because I'm very suspicious that it might be that Entero 68 virus, but with me for the last month, I have been battling. It seems at first like it's the flu, and you have a low-grade fever, and then different symptoms will go and come. With my children, it began with them having fever, and I have a 21-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 8-year-old daughter. They started with the fever, and they just slept for several days. Their fever got it pretty high, and then they recovered, and we thought that it was great, and they were going to be okay. They were good for like 2 or 3 days, but they were weak. And then the fever came back after several days, and they started just vomiting every 15 to 30 minutes for 2 to 3 days.
Whoa.
Well, one of them did it for several days, and then the other one did it. They were able to beat it in maybe a day and a half approximately. But then it starts with the vomiting, and then after that, of course, you're dehydrated and weak, and there's a recovery time. And then they got better for 2 or 3 days, and then it came back again, and then it hit them with fever, and then it was in their lungs. And as a parent, of course, those of you that are parents, you know how scary that can be with your kids because we're the pneumonia thing. And my daughter had it pretty bad in her lungs, and we had to do all the measures to get steam into the room and do all of those things. And we've done everything naturally, and we've tried to boost the immune system. But even with doing the silver and all of the alternative things that are out there, this thing is still very tough to beat. So with me, I didn't start throwing up. I was able to combat it better than my children, but still for the last month I have been down. And when I recorded the program with you last time, Joe, I was right in the middle of it, so I was kind of struggling along there. But the other thing that's very odd with this sickness is your legs, the muscles in your legs hurt the entire time. And to this day, it's been about a month now for me, but your legs really hurt. The muscles in your thighs and in your calves and your shins, they hurt. And I've never had a sickness that did that. So when I was looking at the symptoms for this virus, the 68, they said it's paralyzing some children and adults. It makes their legs hurt. So that right there raised a red flag that that's possibly what's going on here. And one person in our area has already died of it. And I'm pretty sure that this thing it's being bumped on the news because of Ebola, but this thing is really infecting even more people. Probably in the millions right now are combating this thing nationwide, coast to coast. I'm hearing about it. So I just want to bring this up that I have never seen a sickness that goes and comes back like this, and I am very suspicious that this thing is also one of their creations in the lab, and that Joe and Doug, I believe that if we are entering the age of plague, we're not going to be limited to just Ebola or this one. I can see, because God says 7 times more plagues, so I can see that there's going to be a variety of sicknesses and illnesses that are off the charts and just weird. It'll be a resurgence of sicknesses that we haven't seen in a long time or that are rare, and they're going to be spread across the United States because that's what's going on. We're going to see TB in ways we've never seen before, and whatever method the New World Order uses to spread it and bring it here, they're going to use it. They're going to pull out all the stops, and already it's pretty easy to conclude that many of the illegals that came across the border were infected with various sicknesses, and they're going to continue coming, bringing their sicknesses, which brings up a comment that was made by, you probably heard a comment from Kelly, that military gentleman who stated that if Ebola makes it to South and Central America, those people are going to then flee South and Central America. They're going to come north, and we're going to have a barrage of infected people. And then he said, Katie bar the door. I've never heard that term before, but he said it's just open it up because they're going to come in. So, Doug, there's a lot of threats. And over the last few years, we've been talking about the invasion threat from the South, but I did not foresee that it was going to include people from the South coming in with Ebola. I never thought that. I knew what I was able to hear from the Holy Spirit and what I was able to harvest from the Scriptures about an invasion from the South, and it's part of the judgment. But this thing is very creative. The way it happens is it always takes place in a way that is unexpected and that we don't see and that we don't foresee. I guess that's the way it always is. And so right now we are watching and experiencing the plan and their plan. And in their plan, they have an end game. Now, whether or not this is the end game to depopulate the world, according to the Georgia Guidestones, 500,000 people or 500 million people, and
right.
Of course, what was that block? Someone placed it up there, and then it came back off. Someone placed a 2014 date on the Guidestones. Then I saw a video of a maintenance worker taking it down, so I don't know what that was, but that thing's very mysterious. But it's also very telling because they let us know right there and how many people know about this plan. So is this Ebola event that's happening right now, is it going to phase out? And that's the thing that I need to qualify. I don't know if it's going to phase out with Ebola, but then something else will take over. So I need to qualify this. I'm not saying it's Ebola only. I believe it's going to be pestilence and plague, though, at some point, and it's going to get worse and worse. So the big question is this the beginning of the big one and the big plan? And is this going to be what will require for the people to change their outlook and to change the way that they think? Now, Joe, I sent you, or you said you had it up, the Brzezinski quote. Can we play that?
Yeah.
Because Brzezinski, he's on record, and you've played it on your program before, and so have I, but I just want to remind the listeners of what Mr. New World Order Brzezinski said. By the way, he's one of the chief main underground invisible advisors for Mr. Ebola Berry. So he's part of the individuals, he's the academic string of the puppet master design. So he made a comment that was, go ahead and play it, Joe, because there's no way to explain this one.
You're right, Nathan, and ladies and gentlemen, do not forget that the spawn of this man is in the Illuminati mass media, MSNBC, Mika, with Joe Scarborough. Just don't forget that the spawn reaches into our media and, of course, channels everything that goes on. So go ahead, Joe. Sorry about that. I wanted to get that in there.
That for the first time in human history, for the first time in all of human history, almost all of mankind is politically awake. And these new and old major powers face still yet another novel reality, in some respects unprecedented. And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. I once put it rather pungently, and I was flattered that the British Foreign Secretary repeated this, as follows. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people, literally. It was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. It is easier to kill than to control.
Wow.
What
do you say to that, Doug?
Son of a gun. What a sick. I'll stop there.
But there it is. And, over the last few years, as we've come on and discussed current events, and we saw the Boston bombing, false flag, and we saw a lot of anomalies happen in recent American news developments and things that have taken place, and many times the outcome of general opinion, for the people that weren't awake, it was just a continual snooze fest. But for the people that actually are educated and who are not dumbed down and who understand the Constitution and who are God-fearing, they saw these events as an in-your-face attempt to destroy the Constitution. Example, the gun control thing that we saw after the Boston bombing and after many shootings that we have seen. It always seems to gravitate to gun control, but then the people will rise up and they'll start polishing the handles of their guns and getting out the weapons and getting ready for the revolution, and they want to fight. They're ready for it. There are some people that cannot wait for this. There are patriots that cannot wait for the fight to begin. But here's the interesting thing. If a certain event were to happen that would take the fight away from the people who are aware of the Constitution, the freedom fighters, the politically incorrect ones, the God-fearers, if an event were to come that would make them the enemy by most of the population, then it would be the war would be done before it even started. And I cannot think of anything that would fulfill that better than this Ebola crisis, because Mr. Henry New World Order Kissinger made a comment in France in 1991, and I have it right here in front of me, and I want to read this, and it says it all, and it summarizes what we're possibly about to see happen. Here's what he said. He said, "Today America would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there were an outside threat from beyond, whether real or propagated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by the world governments." And when we look at this threat of Ebola, Doug, how interesting is it that people are now crying for travel restrictions, where in the past we would say, no way, you can't restrict our travel, but now people want it to keep us safe. Close the borders to keep us safe. Restrict people coming here and there to keep us safe. Don't let people get on buses. Restrict certain people. Identify and categorize certain individuals who should not be allowed to get in a taxi cab, a subway, a train, etc., because they're not worthy and they don't fit the standards that we now need and that are necessary to keep us safe and healthy. This Ebola crisis could fulfill all of that. And how many well-meaning patriots and individuals who also believe in the Constitution would willingly say, yeah, go arrest my neighbor. They refuse to take the vaccine. I heard Mr. Blaze, what's his name? The Mormon guy.
Glenn Beck, yes.
I heard him yesterday, Doug. How soon till the vaccine comes out? This is crazy. They need to get it. If they were to shoot anything in my arm, I would take it to be safe from this Ebola thing. He's the mouthpiece for this. So the mood of people is going to change regarding vaccines and a lot of measures that in the past we were against. Ebola fits the bill for all of them. So in a way, when you consider and think about this method, it's very crafty. It has wicked genius behind it, and it's going to do its job to deceive a lot of people into tightening the noose and to raising the iron curtain around us and the wall and all of those things. And it's also going to equip Mr. Ebola Berry with the measures and his executive orders. He will gladly do them because we're asking him to do that. So Mr. Henry Kissinger, in a way, was correct because people do cry out for safety, and we're watching it happen, Doug.
Very profound, Nathan. You talked about 9/11, the effects, the psychological effects we're seeing a replay here of the fear created by 9/11. See something, say something, turn in your neighbor. Let's restrict. Even the conservatives, I was one of them, who cried out for, hey, let's get laws in place so we could fight this enemy, this terrorist enemy already within our borders. Yes, there are. Just like today, look, the Islamic enemy is here in America. Yes, but the draconian laws that we have enacted do nothing but curtail the liberties of the law-abiding citizens. So you're going to see conservatives like 9/11 crying out, or so-called conservatives, Christian conservatives, crying out, saying, protect us from this disease, vaccinate us. Yeah, give me the vaccination. And you know what? If you don't take it, you are so irresponsible. This is ripped out of the pages from 9/11, same template, same players, same globalists, same satanic agenda. And folks, if you don't understand it, and yeah, you can have Mr. Spaghetti and Chocolate Sauce throwing spaghetti and chocolate sauce all day long and laughing about it, and laughing about the inept aspects of the government. That's a reference to Glenn Beck and Stu, his sidekick, I don't know, Red Skelton, and whoever his sidekick was, I can't remember. Anyway, but what we're seeing here is fear as an incredible motivator, and of course, people. We have to understand that, of course, neighbors will turn on neighbors, family members on family members, friends on friends, and this is going to be just incredible. Fear is a fantastic motivator. You can get people to do just about anything if you have the ability to create the right kind of fear. And, of course, the best kind of fear is one that has the ring of truth or the most truth to it. Yes, the Ebola virus is real. The threat of a horrible death is real. But however, look at the bigger picture. I've seen, by the way, and the bigger picture is to rip out our moral identity, our national identity, to destroy this country. And you mentioned it earlier, too, the Tavistock Institute, to weaken the moral fiber of this nation, demoralize the people, to make us the laughingstock and the shame of the world, and to program the minds of the unwashed and the people who are too lazy or too pre-programmed to understand what's really happening. Go ahead, Nathan.
Another comment I want to make, or observation, is what a lot of people aren't considering. The wise ones are, and the smart ones are. I'm sure that you've thought of it and you've talked about it. But while the left hand is occupied with Ebola, what's the right hand doing of the New World Order? Ebola is a huge distraction. And while this thing is taking place, you know, Doug, ISIS has not even been discussed or talked about. Russia, China. What else is taking place right now? What troop movements have been taking place? What are we doing with our troops? What are Russian troops, Chinese troops? What war games are taking place? What threats are taking place before our very eyes? But we aren't seeing it.
Yeah. ISIS is a threat. Of course, we're talking about the Egyptian god or goddess, Isis. Babylonian goddess Isis. Isn't that name interesting? And they're about to overtake Baghdad. Go ahead.
They're releasing their final monetary policy documents on how to disannul and reconsolidate the economy after a currency reset. And that's from the IMF and World Bank.
Stealthily planning the destruction of the currency of the dollar that's going to destroy our economy and thereby the economy of the world for a season, and all those things are being worked on and taking place. But even the alternative media is occupied. It's not on the radar.
You're exactly right. No, you're exactly right. And what's the right hand doing? I do believe, yes, ISIS indeed a threat over there as well as over here to a lesser extent, but nonetheless a threat. And the right hand of the globalists, I can feel them in my back pocket. What little currency I have, they're grabbing it. I can see it. They're going to bring down the national. I mean, I do believe that the larger picture here, ultimately is to bring down America. The target is to destroy this country through the various by keeping us preoccupied with Ebola. The financial collapse will kill us quicker. It'll tear away the social fabric of our country. And you know something, people are going to they will start rioting, they're tearing up cities, in addition to, well, if there are any people left, or those people who will not correspond with the imposition of martial law. So you're absolutely right, Nathan.
And with that, I want to talk about the glimpse that God gave me, a prophetic dream. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've never heard me share these things, I believe that we're in the last days, and this is something that is spoken of in the Scriptures. God does give dreams to people, to humans. Not that we deserve them, not that we're great. God gave them to Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was not even a follower of God, but God gave him a dream. So a dream does not show the value of the person. It's just God's grace. It's God's willing to reveal what's going on. And for those of you that struggle with this thing, there's no way I can convince you otherwise. But for those of you that understand that this thing is real, then I'm speaking to you. Now, on YouTube, you can go easily to YouTube and type in prophetic dream or dream about this or that, collapse of America, invasion, etc. And there are thousands of people posting their dreams on there. So there's a phenomenon occurring right now worldwide with individuals, with people, not just with me or my colleagues. It's happening everywhere, Joe and Doug. So I'm nothing special. I'm just an individual who happens to who gets visited by these things from time to time. Now, before I had this one, it's been a while, probably 4 months before I had another one, going back 4 months. But recently, God gave me a new one, and I knew this thing was very, very profound. It had so much information on it. It had so much detail. And so I published it. I placed it on my website. So if you go to my website, if you haven't read it already, it's up. It's at watchmanscry.com on the front page. And it says Prophetic Warning by Nathan Leal, The Coming Crash and Collapse of America, and you can follow along. And I'm going to talk about this now. Now, I had it on October the 11th. Interesting date, by the way. And I woke up, and I immediately spoke to my wife about it, and then I called up some of my friends, and I asked them what they thought. And I always do that when I have a dream because I want to get the counsel of others. I don't want to just try to interpret it on my own. I want to hear what others think, so I did that. And then I pray about it. I ask God, and then I search the Scriptures, and then I do research. So there is homework behind a dream. I don't just throw it out. So I published it, and this is what it had. This is what happened. In the dream, when it started, I was standing in the downtown area of a very large city in America. I don't know what city it was, but I was looking to the north, and I was on the edge of the skyline, the downtown area, and I saw the buildings in front of me. The buildings were approximately 20 to 40 feet, or 20 to 40 stories tall. And as I was looking at all of the buildings from the right, from the east, a plane appeared, and it was a white plane, unmarked, no markings. It was a passenger airliner, a fairly large one. And it was in a steep dive, but it was in a quarter turn so that its left wing was facing downward. And I asked my son, who dabbles with 3D rendering programs, and I scribbled on a napkin what I saw, and I asked him to make me some images. So he did, and they're part of the alert. So those images that you see are not the exact pixel by pixel recreation of what I saw. It's just, it was my son, an artist rendering. But it's pretty close. All right, now, the plane was flying sideways. It had no markings, and its left wing was pointing toward the ground, and it was in a steep dive, and then it went behind one of the buildings that was right in front of me. I didn't see it after that, after it went behind the buildings, but then within a few seconds, I heard, well, it's probably less than a few seconds, there was a fireball, there was a loud flash, loud explosion, it crashed. So I started to run to see the damage, and as I started running in my dream, instantly I was then inside one of the buildings that was overlooking the street where the airplane crashed. And the building I was in was about 20 to 30 stories tall, but it had glass in the window. The glass wasn't gone. But as I looked at the landscape, I could see for about a half-mile radius that the entire downtown area was heavily, heavily damaged. It was not flattened like a very strong nuclear bomb would do, but it was very heavily damaged. All of the windows were blown out, and some of the buildings were leaning over. Some of the buildings had part of their facade missing and chunks of their infrastructure missing. So there was a lot of damage. And I looked across from where I was at a building that was right in front of me, and this building was very odd, and I could not take my eyes off it. I spent some time looking at it and just wondering what it meant and why it was so. And the building that I saw looked like a grain silo. It looked like it was made out of grain silos. And you know the grain silos have those tubes that are real tall, and they can be several stories high, and you fill them with grain. Well, this building design had several of these tubes that made up the building. And if you see the article, you can see a picture of this grain silo-looking building. As I was looking at it, I noticed that a large chunk of the middle of it was missing. It was a big hole in this building, and it had a huge sign on the front of it. I could not read the sign, though. I couldn't make out what it said. So at first, I didn't know why, and I was kind of disappointed. I was struggling to make it out, but I couldn't even make out any of the words at all. It was just the letters were blurry. I couldn't see anything as far as what the sign said. So then, as I was looking at this building, then instantly I was looking down at the street, and then instantly I was on the street. And that's what happens with dreams. You move around, and there's some oddities that take place, but that's how dreams work. So I was on the street looking at the damage. By the way, I could not find the plane, and there was no crater in the ground, in case you're wondering, but there was a lot of damage. So I was looking around, and I heard the cries of a lot of people running around, which also struck me as interesting because most of the buildings had people still alive inside of them. So I wondered to myself, okay, if this was a nuke, why are the people still alive? So was it a nuke? That part I don't know. But maybe a suitcase nuke wouldn't kill everyone in a building. Those of you that know this, and Doug, you can comment on that in a moment. But anyway, I was on the street looking at the damage, and then all of a sudden an object came out of the sky and crashed on the street right in front of me, and it shattered into a bunch of pieces. It was a rocket. I was able to look up right before it hit the street, and it resembled an Apollo-type rocket in its structure. Now, again, I got my son to make it. It's not exactly, he didn't do it exactly like I described, but that's what he made for me. It was actually coming straight down, and it was red, white, and blue. Now, I want to also make this comment. In the image that I have, I noticed that he put red, blue, and white, but I meant it to be red, white, and blue. And I got a few emails from people saying, you know, the red and the blue are touching. That's Russia. But it was red, white, and blue. I know that for sure because I remember the dream. So for that, I apologize that that's not exact. I didn't mean to confuse anyone, but it was red, white, and blue. So it came out of the sky and broke into a bunch of pieces. After it shattered, by the way, there was no explosion, but it was very loud. And I was noticing that then it created even more panic. People started running around crying, and the cries that I heard were blood-curdling, Doug, which tells me, you see, every part of a prophetic dream means something. And the cries that I continue to hear from the people represent something, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But in summary, it represents the mayhem that's coming. So as I was looking at the pieces that were all over the ground of the rocket, then another object fell out of the sky, and it landed on the ground. And this one was very odd. It was from where I was. It landed not far from me. It was about 20 to 30 feet across. It was an electric sign, the kind of sign that you would see on a tall pole in a regular business, a car lot, things like that. It was very big, 20 to 30 feet across, about 10 feet in thickness, and it was green. But on the face of it, it said the word Standard Oil. And on the sides of it, it had handles on each side made out of steel rebar, which were also painted green. And when it hit the ground, it was very loud. I heard the sound of metal crunching, but it didn't shatter. It just hit the ground. And when that thing hit the ground, then I was back into the building that I was originally looking at, the tall building, and I was looking down at all of the people, and I saw the building start to empty. The people left the buildings because they started to become fearful that something else was going to come out of the sky and crush the buildings where they were, so they didn't want to be anywhere near a building because they believed the buildings where they were in were going to be destroyed and flattened and crushed. So as a result, the buildings emptied, and it looked like thousands and thousands of ants running along the street. Kind of like the image you would see if you were in a high vantage point on New Year's Eve in New York City where all the streets are full of people. It was like that. And the people were all crying. There was a stampede going in all directions. They didn't know what to do. But the panic that I saw in them was off the charts. The mayhem, the confusion, it was off the charts. And as I was looking at this, I started to wonder, what does it mean? And then boom, the dream was over. So when I awakened, as I stated, I shared it with my wife. I said, this thing is huge. I don't know what it means, but I then began the process to research it and figure it out. Now, at this point in time, I have summarized a few things with what it means, and I want to say this, and I want to qualify what I'm going to say is with this. It is still a work in process because these things have several layers of meaning. And when a prophetic dream happens, it is not always literal. And in fact, most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's symbolic to represent a literal thing. For example, the dream from Pharaoh about the cows eating the sick cows, the famished cows ate the big cows, and that represented a famine that was coming, and then the corn vision that he had. Also, we have Nebuchadnezzar with his, which represent the end-time kingdoms, etc. So a prophetic dream is symbolic many times, but there is also literal interpretation mixed in with it. So I want to qualify with that. Now, so far, are we on the same page, Doug? By the way, I don't. Do you have the images in front of you, Doug?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, and by the way, as I discuss these things, I am open to your comments and your opinion because, again, this is one of the rules of when God gives a glimpse. We only can see it in part, and we only know in part, and that's why it takes everyone. It takes the brethren. God may give wisdom to someone else. That's one of the ways that God does it, and that's a purpose. That happens on purpose so that one person can't be full of himself. We need the whole body to figure this thing out. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to contribute and email things, if you happen to know some facts or parts of history, because I'm going to mention some history in a moment, feel free to email me. Go to my website, watchmanscry.com, and I'm open to that. I welcome it. All right.
Yeah, yes. And let me just say, folks who are listening by the computer, please go to Nathan's website, watchmanscry.com. Click on the appropriate link to that dream and look at the images. And as Nathan said, look, we're all in this together. This is your homework assignment. Please help Nathan, help us. Let's all figure this out. Nathan, I just want to say something, if I can, because you and I spoke about this, or you tell me when I could comment about the Standard Oil thing. But you tell me when I comment on that.
I'm going to go line by line. There's 3 parts, and that'll be the 3rd part, and then we can talk about that.
Okay.
Now, the very first image that was notable was the plane. The plane was white. There were no markings on it, but I believe that plane represents not just one thing. It represents several things, and it's very symbolic. At first, when I saw the plane explode, I was thinking to myself, okay, another 9/11, or is there a suitcase nuke in the plane, and that's what this means? And by the way, side note, Doug, I believe that could be a part of this. I really do, because we know that ISIS has already claimed that they're going to do this. So, and I'm going to mention that in a moment. But on top of that, though, symbolically, the white plane, what does it represent? Well, first of all, it's white, and white in the end times is deception, because we see in the book of Revelation the white horse is deception, and we see over and over the representations of the white hat that is not really white but devious. And so I believe that plane represents deception, first of all, and since the left wing was pointed down, I believe it represents the left wing of the current regime that's in power right now. So that means the Obama administration as well as other regimes throughout the world that are left-wing. And since most of the world is controlled by the left wing, this applies to them. The left wing is going to bring destruction to the United States. And this city could represent many cities. So, number one, ladies and gentlemen, the left wing is going to destroy this country, and they're well on their way to doing it. I don't believe there's an argument about that. If anyone's Democrat, that's listening and saying, Nathan, how dare you, blah, blah, blah. You know what, folks? We're beyond an argument or debate on how horrible and embarrassing the current administration is to the history of America. If we survive this thing, this administration is going to go down as the most inept, incompetent. Doug, what are the words? Devious, scheming, untransparent.
Satanic, aside from incompetent, certainly nefarious, satanic, Luciferian, globalist, Marxist bastards. And
Indeed.
I mean that in every sense of the word.
Indeed. So the white plane, number one, deception is before our very eyes. And deception is going to bring in, now here's the other part, a payload. Now, let's talk about the plane and the payload of a plane. The destruction that's going to come to America will be by the transportation that can be provided by a plane or an airliner. Right now, we're watching Ebola carry this through. We're watching Ebola being spread throughout the country on airliners and on planes. So if Ebola is part of this situation and part of this equation, and I believe it is, or the threat of Ebola or the nefarious theater production of Ebola, whatever way they're doing it, it's deception, and it's going to be used to spread the destruction of America. Because the end game, and I don't want to get lost in the variables of how and why, et cetera. I want to talk about the end game that's going to affect our lives, Doug and Joe, and the end game is going to be destruction. So deception is going to bring a payload of deception. The plane is going to bring deception into America, into the cities, and it's going to crash in the middle of the downtown cities of America. I believe Ebola is one of those things. I really, really do. So what other things can be brought in? Well, we need to also include a payload of a literal attack using a plane, a suitcase newt, etc. The missing plane from Malaysia, Doug, what's going to happen to that thing? Is that waiting in the wings? Is it being repainted? Is it being equipped?
Good point. Good point.
Are the fuses being lit on it? I mean, what does it have, and when is it going to arrive? But aside from that, by the way, I do believe that will be used. ISIS has already stolen some of our planes. By the way, while Ebola's taken over the news, I saw a headline, ISIS is gaining in their warfare with Baghdad, and they're going to get a hold of a lot of American military equipment. So what are they going to use that for? Well, is some going to end up here on our shores? It wouldn't surprise me. So the plane and a plane, the use of a plane is going to bring a payload of a lot of pain to America. Now, I placed a picture of the United Nations there because if Ebola continues in the way that it's doing, whether it's fabricated or real, eventually America, and since Obama is in their pocket, they're in Obama's pockets and they're all joined at the hip, the United Nations at some point may be asked to come in and rescue and save the day. And the UN planes are white. So that's another thing I want to throw out there, which will be the vaccines. The vaccines will arrive on the white planes to save everybody. But in spite of however the news report and in spite of the movie poster for their production, the end result will be that rescue of deception is going to crash, and it's going to bring destruction here. So that is going to be the end game of the white plane. So I want to make sure that everyone is aware that deception is in motion right now. This is one thing that God wanted to make very clear. The white plane is deception, ladies and gentlemen, so do not believe everything you hear. And then, Doug, that gives credence to a lot of the questions you were raising about the anomalies. Well, they're deception. So let's have vigilance and know that the deception is before our eyes, and we have to be very, very smart about it and wise about it. Now, sadly, our family members and loved ones are not going to realize that it's deception, and they're going to think the white plane's the cowboy with the white hat coming to save the day with his posse, but it's going to be far from that because the end result will be destruction. So the white plane brings destruction, and then also there's going to be a terrorist attack because, as I read in Leviticus 26, terrorism will arrive. I've also read it from Ezekiel chapter 21. Terrorism will arrive when God judges. So after those events happen, the big question is, what will the landscape look like? That was the first hit. Will America turn? Will America repent? I don't think so. So therefore, the next phase is going to happen. What is that? Well, first we have to look at the aftermath. And after the plane crashed, when I was in the building looking down, I saw destroyed buildings. So how do we interpret that? Does that mean that physical buildings are going to actually have their windows broken? Possibly, and eventually. But I also believe that it's talking about the value of real estate. Commercial real estate, downtown areas, is going to be destroyed. We're going to see damage to the markets of downtown areas across the country because of the financial crisis that's going to ensue. Now, one of the buildings that was very notable that I saw, let's talk about the silo building that I saw. That building got my attention, and I couldn't take my eyes off it, but the building looked like grain silos. Therefore, many times when God has given dreams, and we can see it in the scriptures as well, when God talks about grain, it means famine. It means that there is going to be a famine by whatever means, whether it's drought or distribution or just things aren't going to go right. Famine is the end result. So this building that I saw that was damaged by the white plane was showing us that grain was emptied of the silo. And this is one of the things that I find very, very alarming, Doug, because I went to God and I prayed and I asked him about it. And, you know, I don't really have to do that, and I didn't have to do that because I've had enough studies already over the last few years where God has already confirmed that famine is here and famine's part of the judgment and that the dollar's going to crash. I have other shows that I've talked about. I've had other prophetic dreams that the dollar's going to crash, etc. So that's already on record. But this one, being that it's going to be related to this crashing plane, alarms me because I believe that it means that famine is coming. And how could this happen? Let's talk about if Ebola continues to bring fear across the United States, Doug, let's talk about how a famine could result from this. Well, there could be truck drivers who say, I'm not going to drive my truck and go into into Ebola territory. That place is already known to have contagions. I don't want to shake hands with anyone. I don't want to exchange clipboards with anyone that have Ebola on them. I'm not going to do it. So it could affect the transportation of trucking, of distribution. We could see farmers that for whatever reason, maybe they get sick. There's a lot of areas that could cause a disruption in the food supply. But a big part of it can be because of the Ebola scare and because of the restrictions on transportation, it's going to have a pivotal effect, a domino effect on the price of fuel, which we're going to get to in a moment. But when fuel prices become affected and we start seeing a disruption in the value of the dollar, then food prices are going to also get expensive. And that's the other explanation of how famine can take place, meaning it's out of reach, it's out of affordability for people. So this Ebola threat, Doug and Joe, can cause food prices to skyrocket to the point where the silos will be empty. People will no longer be able to afford their food. It's the perfect variable to bring a crisis of food to America. It works in their favor. So one of the things I need to leave everybody with, ladies and gentlemen, please make notes. And I say this from my heart of hearts. Do what you need to do yesterday and the week before and the month before to get your stores of food. Fill up your pantry, and whatever it takes, do it. Rearrange your priorities. If you say, I don't have any money, look in your garage of things you haven't looked at lately or played with or messed with lately. Put it on Craigslist. Liquidate some of your stuff and buy food. That's how serious this is, Doug. People need to rearrange their schedules and their priorities. And if it takes liquidating a few things, there's an old car sitting in the driveway, sell that car and buy food. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't stress that enough. Do it right now, because in my spirit, I can say with confidence that food prices are going to get affected in the days ahead. So please, please let that be noted. Now, the building that looked like a silo had a sign on it, and I could not read the sign. After I awakened and I sought God, then the Holy Spirit revealed to me, kind of like you knucklehead, I put a sign on the silo because the silo is the sign. In other words, you don't have to read the sign. The silo building is a sign. Nathan. So I want to say this, Doug and Joe, and I want it to be on record, ladies and gentlemen. Today's October 17th, 2014. Nathan Leal is stating that there is a sign to look out for, and this sign involves a building that is shaped like a silo. I don't know how that's going to play out. I don't know in what fashion. I don't know what city this building is located in, if it's even located at a certain city, but God placed a sign on it, therefore it is a prophetic sign. So write that down and be looking for it. Now, when I was making this alert and typing it up, I wondered to myself if there's an actual building in the United States that's going to explode or have a hole in it or get hit by a plane that looks like a grain silo. And I typed into Google and I started looking, and lo and behold, there's hundreds of them across the country. So it's kind of hard to eliminate and identify which one it was because it's not just one. There's more than one that exists, so I'm saying that up front. However, I am going to make a comment in a moment about a potential area where this might already be in motion. Now, moving forwards, the next thing that I saw was the rocket coming straight down. It looked like the Apollo rocket. It hit the ground, it fragmented, and it fell down, and it was destroyed. What did that mean? Why was it crushed? Well, Doug, we have already talked about this. You've had guests that have talked about the fall of America that's approaching, and you've had people talk about it from the academic point of view, and you've had people talk about it from the whistleblowing point of view, from rumors that they've heard that the fall of America is coming, and you've also had people talk about it from the prophetic or spiritual point of view and the end time point of view. So over and over, we can see that this threat or this future chapter of America has been confirmed over and over as a warning that it's coming. And I want to add to that confirmation, ladies and gentlemen, we're not out of the threat. In fact, the threat is at our door. The fall of America is at our door, and that's what the rocket represented. It represented the destruction of the power and the pride and the glory and everything else that a rocket, because when I saw the dream, I thought of the Apollo lunar rockets. I said, man, that looks just like one of those. And if you can remember, Doug, if you can remember back far enough, that at that time, that was a symbolic object to represent pride and superiority over the entire planet, the Apollo missions, which, by the way, is a side note. We can play with that one if we had the time. But at the time, it represented the power and the glory of the United States, superiority, and it ended up being the arrogance of America, believing that no one else could build a rocket as good as them, and no one else could put on a spacesuit and manufacture a spacesuit. No one can go out into space because only we can, because we're America. And Jesus has red, white, and blue blood in him, and on the cross it was red, white, and blue blood dripping down. So the pride and the arrogance of America showed, and it was like a sludge on America for a while. Now, I don't want to mock that entirely, because I was part of the culture of pride, the pride of America, and it felt good at the time. I liked it. But the downfall and the downside of that is there was a tendency to eliminate the thought that anyone else outside the borders of America mattered. So it caused an attitude of the lack of compassion. How interesting is this, Doug? 8,000 people plus, according to the reports, have died in Africa, and no one's crying and no one's freaking out. But one man died in America, and everyone's freaking out. So I guess when it's here, that's when it affects us.
Yes.
So the pride of America is going to hit the ground, and the glory of America is going to be broken into many pieces. That means that as these things unfold, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to see our country broken of our pride and our power. And our power is in a lot of different categories, Doug. We used to pride ourselves as being the number one in how many categories? Academic, scholarly, education, military might, economic power, financial power, et cetera, et cetera. The output, the grain output, it went on in every category. And why was that? Well, it's because we were blessed. That's why. But now,
that's right.
Over the last 6 years, we're falling in the stats of the world. Infant mortality, we're not number one. The longevity of life, the health of our country, the simple statistic of the obesity of America. We have fallen. Why? Well, it's because we're not blessed. So all of those categories that have been falling are now going to fall down to the very bottom, and America's status in the world is going to be crushed. And the sad part is, Doug, when I saw the rocket hit the ground, and you see the picture of that lady screaming with the mud all over her, that's the best way that I can illustrate the amount of chaos and mayhem when this takes place. Because when the pride of America breaks, that's one thing. But when the power of America breaks, military might, then the gates are open. Who's going to come in? What missile's going to leak through the bubble around us, our cloak of protection? What's going to come through after the pride is broken? And then let's go further. After our power and glory is broken, then our economic strength will be broken, and then it's going to start affecting people at the table, on the plates. The food available is going to be affected, and that seems to be a language that a lot of people understand, that scares a lot of people, the lack of food, the inability to get food. And I see that we're getting to the end of the hour, and on the other side, Doug, I'm going to talk about the continuation of this, but then we're going to actually talk about the amount of chaos when the EBT cards, the food stamps, the entitlements, the checks that people get, the inner city and many of people who depend on their entitlements, when those things are gone, it's going to be a new game, Doug and Joe. We're going to see a new chapter of absolute mayhem, and I'll stop there.
Very interesting. Folks, you're listening to Mr. Nathan Leal, one of my favorite guests to have on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. What an interesting second hour, first hour as well. Mr. Nathan Leal, Watchman's Cry. Yeah, man, I'm telling you, watchmanscry.com. Bookmark it and become involved, folks. Become involved. Listeners out there, correspond with Nathan with respect to your information, your supplementation to what Nathan is talking about. Folks, we're going to right back up for these messages. Stay with us for the third and final hour.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our third and final hour on this Friday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, today being the 17th of October. It's been such an informative and fast-paced first 2 hours, Nathan. Give it back to you and let you continue.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, we have 1 hour, and I'm going to try to squeeze in as much information as I can in this information. We were talking about the chaos that's going to ensue after the rocket. And by the way, if you're just tuning in, what am I, halfway down discussing this? We're talking about
yes, sir.
The prophetic dream that I have. So if you're tuning in right now, go listen to the second hour to hear the beginning part. But it's located on my website, watchmanscry.com, and you can see on the front page the prophecy, the prophetic dream I had about the coming crash of America. So this rocket hit the ground, and there was a lot of screaming. People did not know what to do. So I fully believe, Doug, that when this event takes place and it starts hitting in the amount of power that they intend for it to hit when it hits the ground, you see, the thing that makes no sense is why would the handlers who have been blessed by America and prospered through the middle class of America, why would they destroy America? Well, that's part of the devious satanic plan of the New World Order. They want more customers. They want the whole world to be their killing field, so they have to get rid of the United States. The United States has done her service, but now it's time to spread the aim to the entire world and the entire planet, because the crumbs from America are no longer going to satisfy them, so the New World Order is going to happen. Now, to anyone listening that would argue...
If I can just interject something here about that rocket, may I do that?
Sure.
Because you had mentioned Apollo, and that got me thinking... the reference to like a Apollo type rocket, Saturn rocket type thing. Did you not? I mean, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, it looked like an Apollo rocket.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, I'm pretty big on the Greek or the mythological gods in terms of how they relate to the Illuminati, and it's interesting to me that Apollo, the son of Zeus and Leto, and the twin brother of Artemis, Apollo was considered the god of a number of things, including, and here where to me where it becomes relevant to today's headlines. He's a god of plague, and was worshipped as Smintheus, which is derived from Sminthos, the word rat, or the word or meaning rat, and the Apollo reportedly shot arrows of plague into the Greek camp. Just thought I'd mention that in terms of Apollo, the rocket, Apollo, the mythological god. So just thought I'd mention that.
Doug, that is incredible. Thank you.
Thanks.
That is really incredible.
I do my best.
Yes, and that could be another a layer to this thing. Thank you. That's very profound. I appreciate that.
Look, man, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so you're the expert. So go ahead and continue, sir.
Okay. Well, when this thing lands, and if that's another salvo, and it's not just going to be a salvo, it's actually going to be a direct hit with plague or whatever it is. Wow, that's interesting because ISIS is also using a mythological name, and now we have the Apollo. That's very interesting. But moving forward, when it does arrive, the panic that's going to ensue is going to be absolute and utter mayhem, and it's going to be a social meltdown of the highest proportion. It's going to be a catastrophe where we actually can, the people that study the responses of people, the psychologists who like to study how people respond, this is going to be a perfect case for them to study to see how America, who at one time was self-controlled and seemed to have their manners, they're going to go nuts. Third world, the chaos is going to represent what we see in the third world. And I placed a picture of a person, Private First Class Billy Bob Mayhem, there because that's what I have seen over and over when I have been praying about this and in other prophetic dreams. I continue to see chaotic responses from Americans, Joe and Doug. And, well, what does that mean? How's that going to play out? Well, if you live next to a person that's experiencing the rabid demon of chaos because they're so mad for whatever reason, then beware. So, Doug, should we say, and is it responsible or irresponsible to say, also be thinking about the security of your family? Is that wrong? No, I don't think so.
Oh.
Be thinking about it, folks. If you've been putting off that purchase, get what you need to get to take care of that. And with that, I also want to make a side note, Doug, because I have been hearing some whispers, and I've read a few reports, and I've heard people talking about it. I cannot confirm it, and I don't know what to make of it, but I have heard some people talk that part of this Ebola production is going to include a manufactured disease that is a mix of Ebola and rabies. Have you heard this?
No, I haven't.
I heard it last night from a talk show. They were talking about it. Someone said that they had heard that they're doing some tests already. A sheriff from North Carolina was told, and I can't confirm this at all, but a sheriff from North Carolina was told that they are practicing and planning for the zombie apocalypse and the preparation that when this happens to do headshots, not that they're going to be literal zombies as we see in the movies, but they're going to be infected with the plague where they have rabies. And the reason for a headshot is they die quick and there's less blood to splatter everywhere. So that's a side note. I don't know. Maybe you can research that further. I haven't done enough about it, but that's just a side note. And when you mix that in with how angry people are going to get and how hopeless people will feel when they don't have the ability to feed their families, and for whatever reason people have to use EBT cards, I cannot pass judgment on them, because in the past when the economy was good, Doug and Joe, receiving food stamps was embarrassing for people because they felt like they were failures. But after the economic crash of 2008, I have seen many, many people who were real estate developers and construction carpenters, and they were professionals, electricians involved in the building industry, and they had no choice, and they had to get food stamps because the economy was destroyed. So there is a large portion of our country now that relies on food stamps, not just people in the inner city, but part of the middle class, well-meaning, good, upstanding citizens who had no choice. So I'm not saying this to cast stones at them. I fully understand. But my point is that if those cards stopped and if the funds stopped, the hopelessness that would then ensue for the people that are not prepared, that's the key point, Doug, the people that have empty pantries now, when there's nothing to eat, then people will respond and do things they never thought they would do. And that's where the mayhem starts, because the loss of self-control will overtake individuals, and then when you have the loss of self-control and then people aren't trusting in God, then the enemy, Satan, can come in and tempt people to do crazy and bizarre things. So fear and desperation is going to occur in the United States. I have seen this too many times, Doug. It's going to happen. And that fear and desperation is going to cause a lot of areas, a lot of cities, towns, regions of the country to collapse into riotous mayhem. And if the Ebola threat is occurring in those cities, see, in the past, all you have to do is call out the cops, the SWAT team shows up with riot gear, and they shoot tear gas into the crowd that is looting the stores, and the people go home eventually. Well, when there's an Ebola threat and half of the police officers are worried about becoming infected, and they say, I'm not going there, forget that, I'm staying home with my family, then the loss of civil order through the police forces that exist, when those things are gone, then what? When a person calls 911 that the gangs are outside their door and raiding their garage and stealing the things in their root cellar, then what? No one's going to show up, so what do people do? So I'm presenting the equation for how this thing can really fall apart. Now, by the way, I wanted to mention this. I don't want to give ideas, but this thing is very real, and I'm sure that the powers that be already know about it. But, ladies and gentlemen, please make note of this. ISIS has already stated that they're going to come here and shed blood. They've already stated that Christians are their enemy, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to come to America, raise the flag, et cetera, and win the fight. Well, the jihadists love to carry out suicide missions. In the past, they liked to do the suicide bombings. But what if they did suicide Ebola? What if they purposely infected themselves and then went around the city and sweat and rubbed their handprints on the turnstile at the stadium or at the theater or at the bus, or tried to jog and then wipe their sweat on the seats of buses and trains? And you see, Doug, this thing could be used as a weapon, and I don't think a lot of people have thought about it, but they have thought about it. So there's a very real threat that as it develops, we're going to see some news reports that are going to be off the charts in craziness and bizarre. It'll be hard to process them.
Very,
so the frenzy that is coming.
Tentacles. Yeah, quite a few tentacles to this. You're right.
There's a lot. Now let's get to the next part of my dream, Standard Oil. When I was standing on the street after the rocket exploded, causing mayhem, then the sign came out of the sky and crashed on the ground, and it said Standard Oil on it. I looked at the sign, and I did not understand why a sign would come out of the sky. I mean, who would? But I stared at it for a moment, and I noticed that on the sides there were handles that were made out of rebar. And I placed those in my rendering so that people could see them. And then after I was observing the sign for a moment, then I was back on top of the building, and the people really started freaking out, and they emptied all of the buildings. Now, let's talk about this part of the vision. Now, I mentioned the silo building, and I stated that because there was a sign on it, God was saying the silo building, famine, grain, etc., is going to be a sign. So be looking for that. Now, let's talk about this one. This one was a literal sign, Doug. So That's the way God operates. He puts it in front of our face, and it's like, okay, he who has the eyes to see, look at it and see what it's saying. There will be a sign that's going to involve oil. Standard Oil was the first, by the way, for those of you that don't know history, Standard Oil was the company owned by Mr. John D. Rockefeller in his time in the early 1900s, and Standard Oil was the most powerful oil company in the world at the time, and after they had been bringing grief to a lot of other companies, the federal government decided they were a monopoly and made them break up into smaller companies. They were forced to do it in the early 1900s, and by the way, when they did it, and they broke off into their spin-offs, John D. Rockefeller, through dummy trusts and dummy corporations, owned all of them still. So it didn't change anything. But those companies became Texaco, Amoco, Exxon, Enco, the companies that we now have throughout the world, here in the United States, and that are now drilling throughout the world. But Mr. John D. Rockefeller represents Standard Oil, and Standard Oil represents the petrodollar. Now, that could be an entire program, and Doug, I'm sure you've talked about it enough times that the listening audience knows this. Half the audience probably could explain this better than I could, but the Rockefeller cartel, the cabal of the Rockefellers, created the beginnings of the family dynasties of the New World Order. They were some of the first dynasties, and he was joined at the hip with the Rothschilds, and then he also was buddies with Mr. J.P. Morgan. Now, Mr. J.P. Morgan was a financier, and we know about J.P. Morgan back then, who has now become the Chase Manhattan Bank, which is a part owner of the Federal Reserve. So J.P. Morgan is the dollar, or part of the ownership of the dollar. J.P. Morgan in 1901 bought U.S. Steel from Andrew Carnegie. And when he did that, it made U.S. Steel the biggest steel company at that time in the world. It was the first billion-dollar company. So J.P. Morgan then had control of steel, and then soon after, he was a part of the forming of the Federal Reserve. So the steel portion of this sign represents J.P. Morgan, which is also a part of the Federal Reserve. So when God gave this image and let it happen, he was showing all the parts to make it very clear what it meant. So, Doug, it speaks for itself, but it was green on the sides, the greenback. The Federal Reserve is the greenbacks. After World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement decided that the United States would host the currency of the world. There would be the world reserve currency, and all exchanges of oil would be done in dollars. And from that point on, the United States prospered, even though they experienced inflation every year. They prospered with that situation. Well, here we are now, 60 years, 70 years later, and the world is tired of that arrangement. They're tired of it. They're tired of having to do what the United States says through the barrel of a gun. The U.S. military has been used to force the reserve status of the United States throughout the world. And the IMF is the bully, and the U.S. military has been used as Guido, the leg breakers, to force to make sure the world continues using dollars. But that arrangement's coming to an end, and this dream represents that. The Federal Reserve and the standard of the U.S. dollar, see, the word standard is in the sign, Standard Oil, the standard of the greenback of the Federal Reserve is going to come crashing on the ground. And the sign of it happening will be when the oil markets start to fall. It is a sign. Oil markets are going to fall. I had this dream on the 11th, Friday, just a few days ago. I published it over the weekend. And Doug and Joe, over the last few days, we are seeing the erratic nature of the markets. And, of course, they started before that, but we are really seeing this thing begin to come to fruition. So let the proof be in the headlines that have already been on the Drudge Report. Drudge had a few days ago, crude oil is crashing. Did you see that, Doug?
I did, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that is the sign. And, ladies and gentlemen, I want to make this clear. God did us a favor by showing us that this is about to happen. When the dollar is finally reject it as the world reserve currency, it's going to create an entire new landscape here in America. The things that we are used to getting for a nominal price are going to be unavailable. The price of food is going to skyrocket. And this coincides with a prophetic glimpse that God gave me years ago when he showed me the representation of how expensive food was going to be. And this was the super depression prophetic dream that I had years ago. And in that dream, Joe and Doug, I was in a mall of an unknown city, and average Americans were in this shopping mall. The shopping mall was shut down. None of the stores were open. And I was in the food court of this mall, and people were at the food court to get food. And one of the kitchens in the food court, one of the restaurants, said high school cafeteria. And it was provided by the government, and people could go there to get food. And so I decided to get some food, and I got in line, and everyone was dirty. There was nobody clean. The middle class, it looked third world, tattered clothing. So I got in line, and it looked like a food worker from that we remember from grade school or high school. You know, that lady with the glove in her hand, and she slops down the potatoes?
Yeah.
The nasty potatoes. And she put like 4 or 5, maybe 6 green beans on there, and then some meat. And she gave me the tray, and I looked at it, and I was thinking, man, is this round one or what? Okay, I'll take it. And I slid down that little tray holder line thing that they have, the conveyor. When you walk down and you get to pay for it, and then when I got to the cashier, she goes, that'll be $30. And in the dream, I got mad. I said, $30 for this? I'm not paying that. That's crazy. And I walked away. I was so mad. And I left the mall, and I opened the exit door of the mall, and when I got outside, the minute I opened the door, there was nothing there, but then a sidewalk appeared in front of me, and then a few yards ahead of the sidewalk, a restaurant appeared, and it was a Chinese restaurant, and there was a Chinese man standing outside of the restaurant holding a menu. It appeared in front of me, so I walked over to the restaurant, and I told him, you know what, I'm so upset, just give me a cup of chocolate, of coffee. And I don't know if I've mentioned this I probably have on this program in the past, a few years ago, but I asked him how much coffee was, and he pointed to the menu with a big grin, and it said $10, and I looked. This wasn't latte. This wasn't anything fancy. It was regular coffee. I saw $10, and I said, what? No way, forget this, and the dream was over. So even back then, Doug and Joe, the Holy Spirit has revealed glimpses of how bad it's going to be and how expensive food's going to be. Oh, so when we consider how expensive food is at a school, and then we compare it to $30, well, that's, what, a 5-10-fold increase of food? For coffee, how much is coffee now? Well, a few years ago, it wasn't $10. It wasn't $5. Maybe it's a couple of dollars now, but at that time it was, I believe, $1 or less. So food is going to become very, very expensive. And ladies and gentlemen, I cannot stress this enough. Do what you have to do right now to get ready for this. I don't know how much time we have, Doug and Joe, but the sign is going to be the markets of oil. Be looking for that. Now, when I was doing research for this program, I was curious over where Standard Oil originally existed, where their corporate offices were, and I found out that their corporate offices were in Cleveland, Ohio, and in New York City. But they started in Ohio. So I want to make a comment about that.
Go ahead.
Cleveland, Ohio. I was curious, and I wondered if, well, God, is this a puzzle that I'm supposed to figure out and look between the lines and go further than what you showed? And then there's some truth in there. I didn't know. But I asked that question to myself, so I Googled it, brought up Cleveland, Ohio. So I included that in my release, in my alert, and then I asked the question out loud, does this mean that some things are going to happen in Cleveland or New York that are related to these events? I don't know. And to this point, I still don't know. However, I want to say this. Out of curiosity, and ladies and gentlemen, you can do this, because I'm about to reveal something that's odd, and I believe it's profound. Out of curiosity, I typed in, okay, if Cleveland might be one of the hints of a city, let's type in building that looks like a silo. See what happens. See what comes up. So I did. And ladies and gentlemen, you can do that. Type it in. Are there any silo buildings in Cleveland? And when you do that, you will see that there is indeed a building that is made out of silos on the outskirts of Cleveland. And that building used to belong to Quaker Oats, but it was turned into a hotel. It was remodeled, and it became the Akron Hotel in Akron, Ohio for a number of years. And then recently, a few years ago, the University of Akron purchased that hotel, and now it's part of their dorms, and it's now called the Quaker Square Inn in the University of Akron. So when I saw this, okay, Akron has a building that looks like a silo. Does that mean Akron's going to have something happen? I don't know, but what do I do with this? Since this is speculation, and by the way, this part is not part of the Holy Spirit insisting or God telling me. This is the investigative part of just me thinking out loud. I want to qualify that, Doug and Joe, and listeners, so please do not accuse. Now, God does give us prophetic dreams and prophetic hints and glimpses and visions, etc., that are puzzles and in the form of parables. And we can take those parables and puzzles because we can see this happen over and over in Scripture, and those puzzles and parables can then be played with to the point where you can really figure out things that are even deeper. So if he gave me the image of Standard Oil and I looked it up, corporate office was in Cleveland, and then I associate the building silo, and it brings up Akron, Ohio, is that anything? Is that concrete? Does it mean something? Well, out of curiosity, Joe and Doug, and highly interesting, here we go. Nurse number 2 that waited on Mr. Duncan, who died of Ebola in Presbyterian Hospital in Dallas, the second nurse, over the last weekend, went to her hometown to visit family, and I think she might have gone to a wedding, I'm not sure, but she went to visit her family. Most of you know this, or maybe you've heard about it, in Cleveland. But she flew to Cleveland. That's where the plane went. But her family is actually in Akron, Ohio. So she has Ebola. It's been confirmed. She was on a plane, so the plane got contaminated. She went to Cleveland, and then she went to Akron, and she was with her family. So those family members are now under quarantine in Akron, Ohio. And now the reports are coming out that a teacher who also rode on that plane, who is a teacher in the Cleveland and Akron area, reported that she was also on the same plane. So now the schools are shutting down in the Akron, Ohio area and in Cleveland. So, Doug, is this a coincidence? Is this a lucky thing? Is it an anomaly? I don't know. And I'll say that. I do not know, but I find it interesting that some of the elements from this dream are now playing out when you start figuring out the puzzle, and it's happening right now in real time. So is it going to end there? No, because the building silo sign in my dream is a sign. So ladies and gentlemen, please keep that in mind. We're going to see that somehow play out in the coming developments. And we're also going to see Standard Oil and the price of oil and the oil markets play out as a sign. That cannot be forgotten. So Joe and Doug, on record, I want to say this so that the people who are listening and so that those who would mock and scoff and say that you have crazy wackos who make stuff up and have dreams out of their own imagination can be hopefully put to rest. Most likely they won't, because there's always something and there's always somebody that wants to complain. But out of the grace of God, God wants everybody to know right now to get ready. God wants everybody to know that time is short. He wants everybody to know that the clock is ticking. And if you want to be ready and prepared and you want to be able to face the things that are coming, then this is what I want to ask everybody that's listening. Doug and Joe, I'm just asking this, ladies and gentlemen, when this program is over, talk to your loved ones about this, talk to your spouse about this, and pray and ask God if Nathan's crazy. Ask God if you bear witness with what Nathan said, and if you do bear witness, let God tell you. Let the Holy Spirit confirm. If you do bear witness, then do what you're supposed to do as a responsible head of the house or parent to provide for your family. That means that you have to do the homework, the spiritual homework, and that means that you have to rearrange your priorities, and that also means that you have to prepare and ask yourself the question, if we woke up Monday morning and they said the markets are going nuts, Russia and China pulled the plug from the dollar, They decided they are tired of these sanctions. They have pulled the plug, and they said, forget this. You think you're going to punish us, Obama? I don't think so. We're pulling the plug. We're liquidating all treasuries. Now what are you going to do with this? Doug, if that were to happen on Monday morning, it's going to be too late to go to the store and buy stuff for the price that it is right now. It's going to be too late to go to the store for the price that it will be over the weekend. If we have a week, then that's how much time we have. So, ladies and gentlemen, please take this to God and do the proper thing that's responsible. Aside from the dollar crashing and causing food to go up, the Ebola crisis, and Doug, I want to now ask for your comments on this. If the Ebola crisis happens in the way that it seems to be developing, at some point, if the infection continues to spread across the country, at some point, it's going to affect the distribution of food because people aren't going to want to be in public places. So how is that thing going to play out when the store shelves are empty? Even that thing right there could wreak havoc and cause a lot of problems. So there are many, many fuses. There are many tipping points. There are many dominoes that are lined up, and at any one of them tips over, it could cause a chain reaction that's going to take us into an area that we have never been in. And this is exactly what the New World Order wants. They want a new financial system. They want a crash of the dollar. They want to create chaos. They want martial law, etc. So, ladies and gentlemen, you are hearing a warning right now from the heart of the throne room of God. And I say that with confidence. God wants everyone to know that the time is now to prepare. Now, in the book of Psalms 91, we are told the formula for how to prepare for the plague. Psalms 91 tells us the promise. It gives us an illustration of what we will see during the plague and the pestilence, and it even names names. It says something very interesting. In Psalms 91, by the way, Doug, did you know that it says that the plague is actually an angel of death that walks? Because it says, I have it right here, Psalms 91, verse 6. Well, let me back up. You should not be afraid of the terror by night. The terrorism's coming, nor of the arrow that flies by day. Doug, you mentioned the arrow of Apollo. There it is.
That's right.
Nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor of the destruction that lays waste at noonday.
I want to tell you this too, Nathan. I just sent this off to you as well. Forwarded this off to you as well. In the same vein as Apollo, Saturn, mythical god as well. Thank you, Lewis, for this email. Saturn as a god of ancient Roman religion, wealth, agriculture, and liberation. Isn't that interesting? So, you know, the agriculture, wealth, and agriculture, as we spoke of, both represented by Saturn as well. And you had mentioned, I just wanted to make sure you saw that. And also, catching up on, I want to thank people for taking part in this show. The Federal Register, prospective grant of exclusive license, let's see here. I'm trying to read this with my glasses. Multivalent vaccines for rabies virus and Ebola. So you had mentioned something about rabies virus and Ebola.
Did the Federal Register issue new
thank you. You
law
can read that. I can't.
Or regulation?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't read that.
I'll find it.
So, okay. It's but the bottom line, you're right on the money with the symbology, Nathan. And but you're right. You know, look, when this is, I really believe, folks, this is our last wake-up call. We need to get closer to God. We need to make sure we've got a safe haven. We have extra food and water. We need to prepare for the needs of others, and most of all, we need to be in prayer. Hit your knees, because you know it's interesting too. The first goal, the only goal of government, the big bureaucratic governments, is their own survival. Survival on the backs of the people that they oversee. That's us. This means that they will do anything to survive. And I'll say this as well. I truly believe that one of the major goals of this crisis, manufactured crisis. And I'm not trying to diminish the threat of Ebola, but one of the goals here is to bring down the dollar. When the coming financial collapse does hit, they're going to need to blame it on something instead of themselves. And what better way to say, hey, well, how are we to know that we were going to get struck by this unfortunate pandemic? Well, it would be an excellent cover story for them for the history books in years to come, if there are any left to write.
Thank you, Doug. And I want to leave the audience with something to think about and with some things to study and to look at. And those things are found in Scripture. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a pen and paper, I just want to leave you with this so that you can have something to pray about and ask God to protect you. Now, as I was stating in Psalms 91, we hear about the secret place. And we hear that he who dwells there will abide there. Now, a very key thing, ladies and gentlemen, that must be stressed for Psalms 91 to be over your house, because the bottom line is if this crisis takes place in a number of ways, whether it's mayhem or riots or martial law, whatever, you need to have the cloak of God's protection over your property. On each corner of your property, you need to have angels there protecting you. And I say that because Psalms 91 promises that God will send angels to protect you and your family on your property. It says he will give his, in verse 11, Psalms 91, he shall give his angels charge over you to keep you. That means he will protect you with his angels. But in order to get that protection, it's not automatic. Just because you're a Christian does not mean it's automatic. The homework is, verse 1, he who dwells in the secret place. That means you have to stay there. You have to become accustomed to the secret place. What's the secret place? That's the prayer closet. That's when we're on our knees seeking God, dealing with our mess. And every one of us have a mess, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sure we can all agree to that. I mentioned it in our first hour. We all have a mess, but we have to deal with our mess. So if we become accustomed to the secret place and we learn to abide there under the shadow of him, and if we then can say with confidence, he is my refuge and my fortress, and I trust in him, then he will deliver us. That's verse 3. But if we are embarrassed to come to God because we have hidden sin and we're not where we're supposed to be, we're struggling, we have strongholds, whatever, you know, folks, everyone has things they struggle with. We live in Babylon. It's not easy to live here. I admit that. I'm a human being. I am a man. I know how it is. I know it's not easy, but that's what the secret place is for. That's what repentance is for, to come to God and to cast our cares to him and asking him to deliver us from those things, to cleanse us, to help us with those things. But not doing it will not help you. So if we do become accustomed to the secret place, then there are benefits. And let me read what the benefits are. Now, Psalms 91 is a snapshot of a plague happening during God's judgment, anywhere in the world, anywhere in history. It says, he shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler. That means he'll deliver you from the trap of Satan and from the perilous pestilence. There it is. He'll deliver you from that. He shall cover you with his feathers. Under his wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. Very key, very important. That means that we can't lie to ourselves. We can't pretend. We can't misdirect. We can't ignore. We can't put off. We can't procrastinate. If we want to deal with our mess, we have to be true about it. If you have a problem with a certain area of sin, then be truthful about it. If you ignore it, you're not being truthful, and then he can't protect you. So if we're truthful about our situation and we admit that we need him and we admit our mess with him, then he can become our shield and our buckler. Shield means his protection. Buckler means fortress. So we will be in a fortress where he protects us. Moving on, you shall not be afraid of the terror by night or the arrow that flies by day or the pestilence that walks in darkness. Now, very interesting. In the natural, we picture Ebola or whatever other disease as a microbe, a virus, a germ that's on a door handle. Someone inhales it, touches it, etc., it gets in their body, their bloodstream, they get infected, and they're sick. But in the spiritual realm, there's something that takes place that is beyond our ability to comprehend. The sickness that takes place during a plague is represented by an actual spirit, an angelic spirit that has been sent on assignment to spread it throughout the area. And we can read about this many times in the Old Testament. God sent plague. God sent the destroying angel to Egypt. And by the way, it says the pestilence that walks. If you go to Psalm 78, verse 49, there's another confirmation. 78, 49, and 50. It says, it's talking about the plagues of Egypt. It said, he cast on them fierceness of his anger, wrath, indignation, and trouble by sending angels of destruction among them. The plagues of Egypt were angels of destruction. So angels are given license to destroy those who are in disobedience. So how do you protect yourself from that, ladies and gentlemen? It doesn't matter how strong you are. It doesn't matter if you work out, you have all the bullets in the world, you know the Constitution front and back, you listen to all these scary programs. How do you protect yourself from angels? Quoting the Constitution won't do it. Protecting yourself from the destroying angel only happens one way, and that's the spiritual realm, and that's with dealing with our mess. That's the bottom line. So I need to stress that God will allow destroying angels during the next phase of this judgment, or he gives license to demonic evil angels, fallen angels, and demonic spirits to also destroy. Verse 7, now look at this. If the Ebola plague does happen, the worst case scenario, or if it's some other type of plague in the future, this is what it's going to look like. Verse 7, 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you, near your dwelling. It shall not. So your neighbors will die. You'll hear about the neighbors dying of whatever the plague is. The people across the street, you'll hear about it. Maybe you'll see that someone set their house on fire because, Doug, by the way, side note, how would we deal with that if this thing really becomes rampant like is happening in Africa? Are we going to get to the point where people actually throw a match to the neighbor's house because they don't want to have anything to do with the infection? Is that the kind of things we're going to see? That kind of mayhem,
yes,
that kind of desperation?
Yes, and people better get used to the smell of burning flesh.
Bodies piled up?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, yes, this is, to answer your question, obviously, to eradicate the virus, it's going to come to a point where, yeah, they'll burn buildings down. They will incinerate the corpses to avoid spreading the plague or the virus after the host carrier passes away. But it would still carry the virus.
I'd imagine that'd take a long time because, you have these battles going on, and during this urban warfare, it's going to be hard to be, gathering up these dead bodies as fights continue to rage on.
Absolute mayhem. This is an equation to see things, to see images that here in America we have not seen in our lifetime or our grandparents' lifetime. They see it in third world countries, but not here. So, ladies and gentlemen, the sort of mayhem I'm talking about that is potentially at our door is incredible. Now, hopefully God can give us grace and give us more time, hopefully, but I don't know how much time we have. I do know that he's given us a warning right now, so as a watchman, all I can do is just tell you to prepare. Now, Doug, if perchance a few months go by and the plague doesn't gain a foothold in this country and it slows down, I am pretty sure we're going to hear about it. We'll hear the people that are mocking and scoffing and say, see, you said it was coming and it didn't. But no, my friends, the judgment is here, and the only delay is God's mercy. That's it, because America has now exceeded her grace period. So as we move on in this passage, only with your eyes shall you look and see the reward of the wicked. There it is. Because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. Now, how else can we make sure that we fortify ourselves spiritually. Nathan, what do I do? Okay, I hear what you're telling me, and Doug, I can hear people thinking out loud. Okay, I know I do need to knock this off, and there's some things I know better. Okay, how do I do it? What mental, physical, spiritual exercises do you have? What homework do you have spiritually? Well, repentance happens in the heart, ladies and gentlemen. And the number one element that is a part of repentance is very important, and it has to do with a realization of our mess, and also a realization of how bad things really are and how desperate we really need God. In the book of Ezekiel chapter 9, there is a behind-the-scenes spiritual glimpse that we are given of God's judgment also. And in Ezekiel 9, if you're taking notes, go read this. This is also your spiritual homework, ladies and gentlemen, because I want to challenge you to be able to get to this point, because those that do not get to this point are going to reap the harvest of failure, and the failure is what we're talking about. In verse 1, it says, this is God talking, he called out a hearing with a loud voice, saying, let those who have charge over the city draw near, each with a deadly weapon in his hand. This is God speaking to his angels. And suddenly 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate. These are angels, though, which faces north, each with a battle axe in his hand. So these angels appear with a weapon of destruction. One man among them was clothed with linen and had a rider's inkhorn at his side. So there was an angel with a little pen that he could dab ink into. He didn't have a weapon. He had ink and a pen. And they went in and stood beside the bronze altar. Now the glory of the Lord of Israel had gone up from the cherub where it had been to the threshold of the temple. And he called to the man clothed with linen who had the rider's inkhorn at his side. And the Lord said to him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of men, the men, and let me generalize this to everyone, to the women also, to the people, who sigh, and here's the key point right here, ladies and gentlemen, who sigh and cry over all of the sins and all of the abominations that are done in the city. So what's going on? God's in heaven, behind the scenes in the spiritual realm, and God says, okay, I'm about to destroy the city, but I'm going to preserve the righteous ones so that we can tell them apart. Angel with the rider's inkhorn, I want you to go down there and you make note of the condition of everyone's heart, and the ones that are grieving over the condition of their city, that are sad of the sin that they're observing, put a mark on them. Verse 5, to the others he said, now those that didn't get the mark, watch this, go after him through the city and kill all the others. Do not let your eyes spare, nor have any pity. Utterly slay old and young men, maidens and little children and women, but do not come near anyone on whom is the mark, and start it in my sanctuary. So they began with the elders who were before the temple. And then he said to them, defile the temple and fear the courts with the slain. Go out. And they went out and killed in the city. Now, this was a behind-the-scenes, and by the way, side note, wow, right, Doug? A Hollywood movie that showed that would be amazing. But wow.
Yeah.
So God determines before a judgment the ones he's going to spare. Before the plague starts, before they arrive, before the deaths and the wails and the mayhem and the bloodshed and the people whose bodies are failing and succumbing to the disease, before it even enters their city, the people who will be preserved are marked. So that means, let's bring it here, let's bring it home, let's talk about us. If this is a glimpse of the way that God preserves the righteous ones, then that means that if perchance we are correct in our warning right here, and if I am correct in this interpretation of this prophetic dream and in the warning that I'm bringing, if I'm correct, and Doug, if you're correct, and all your guests are correct, and mayhem's about to start, these things are coming to America, if we are correct, that means that when the mayhem starts, there's going to be a body count. People are going to die. People will be left in their houses dying of disease or death by other means, by crazy people, by rabid people. But there will be death. And that means that Before it starts, though, those that are going to survive will have already been chosen. The way that they were chosen were those who sighed and cried beforehand. That means that, ladies and gentlemen, when you look around your city and you see the things going on in your city, you see how people conduct themselves, you see how people are living their lives. When you're at the store, when you're buying your food and you see the people you walk around, the way people dress, the way people act, all that stuff. When you see all of these things, when you see the type of entertainment that we have on TV and in movies, you see the culture and the very permissive culture of Babylon that we live in the midst of, when you see all of that, does it tempt you to want to be a part of it, or does it grieve you to wish that you weren't a part of it? Does it grieve you to wish that you weren't slimed by it? Does it grieve you to know that it has affected your spirit and contaminated your soul and your mind? Does it make you sad? Now, I didn't say that you have to be perfect. I'm saying when you see the contamination around you, does it grieve you because you don't like being a part of that contamination? Joe and Doug, go to the checkout counter of any grocery store, and right there are the periodicals, the tabloids with half-dressed people, and how many people, regular folks, even people who are Christians, will look at that and then have a decision to make. Ooh, that looks cool, or, man, there it is again, and try to look away. There's an example right there of the grieving process. If you look at it and then you entertain the thoughts, then you feel dirty, you feel guilty. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to get to the point where these things grieve us and we don't like them. And we have to then ask God to cleanse us from the sludge of Babylon and from these things that are infecting our lives. And if not us, our children. How many of you have teenage kids or grown-up children who are struggling in Babylon? They're away from God. They're prodigals. And they don't want to hear of this. They don't want to know anything you have to say. And at the rate they're going, in the condition they are, they would not pass this test that we just read in Ezekiel chapter 9. They would be one of the fallen ones. And you don't want to see that. So what do? You grieve, you sigh, and you cry not only for yourself but for your loved ones. And you ask God to draw them. You ask Him to do a miracle, to preserve them, to protect them. And say, God, even though they're away from you and they're being disobedient, God, have mercy on them. Bring them back. God, please have mercy, bring them back, because God can do it. Joe, you're a testimony. You've told me you were a rascal a few years ago, right? God got a hold of you?
Yeah.
I was a rascal for more than half my life.
But God got a hold of you, right?
Oh,
God
absolutely.
got a hold of everyone listening that is now in the fold. What did it take? We all have a story. We all have a testimony, but we have to maintain it, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a race to the end. And I want to leave you with this. Please do your spiritual homework and learn. Learn these things. I know that there are some people that say, Nathan, you make Christianity sound emotional and, you overreact. You don't have to do all that. Well, you know what, folks? That's an intellectual form of Christianity, because I just read right here emotion. Sighing and crying. That's from the Word of God. So if sighing and crying is going to save us and protect us, then it must be pretty important. So, ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with this. Please take these words to heart. Pray about them. I am going to be releasing in the next few days another News from the Wall where I'm talking about these very things as well. And I'm also working on my new sermons. I did mention that some people aren't clicking on the sermons. If you're struggling, click on those for such a time as this messages. They will help you. Take them to heart and follow along. I see we're running out of time, Joe and Doug, so I thank you for bringing me on. And I just hope and pray that these words will affect and change lives and draw people to God.
Nathan, I think mission accomplished.
Part one.
We're
going to have to do part two soon. This was a fantastic show, Nathan. And an example of one of your great audio sermons is the Overcomer series. That was the last one I listened to, but it was something that is full of biblical precepts and foundational scriptures that we need to understand, and teachings that we need to not only understand but incorporate into our behavior and into our life as these times are, becoming more unstable and people are becoming more rabid, as you said.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Right, sir. God bless you, my friend. Thank you. And then thank your lovely wife as well for sharing you with us and our audience. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you. I'll let her know that.
Wow. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Nathan Leal, watchmanscry.com. We're up against it. Tomorrow night we've got Augusto Perez and Danny Morano, as well as Catherine Albrecht on the weekend edition with Sheila Zelinsky. It's going to be a great show, and I just want to make sure we announce again next week, although we will not be attending in Idaho, at the Valley Church in Caldwell, Idaho, Augusto Perez, October 24th, 25th, 26th. Go to theappearance.com for information. And then where we will be attending, of course, is November 14th and 15th in Columbus, Ohio. Interesting place after this broadcast. Having said that, folks, heavy program tonight, but realize this. You're part of our extended family. We're with you. You're not alone. You're never alone as long as you have us. We are here, and we're all in this together. We just have to hit our knees, repent, and pray. Until tomorrow, stay safe. God bless.